Elizabeth keeps having the same dream in which a man shows her a book. This scene is surrounded by a magical light that symbolizes the peculiarity of what is happening. The book describes the story of Valfer, the crown prince of the Elenia Empire, Enoch Silas, who, along with his companions, saved the continent from an evil dragon by changing his destiny. Elizabeth notices that the book's protagonist has the same name as herself, which causes her to feel strong emotions and think deeply about coincidences. The man tells Elizabeth that she is the very protagonist of the book. This statement startles her, suddenly transforming the dream into something more significant. Elizabeth, it turns out, is a brilliant sorceress of the world, a warrior and the lover of His Highness the Crown Prince of the Empire, Enoch. Elizabeth's reality, however, is much different from the one described in the book. She is surrounded by violence and chaos as the city is engulfed in flames and people scream in terror and pain. Satanists with masks attack Elizabeth, threatening her and forcing her to give her life to their master. Their cruel intentions and scary masks leave Elizabeth terrified. In despair, Elizabeth realizes that she is but a will-less slave, kidnapped by those who praise the devil. Her soul is tormented by fear and hopelessness. Elizabeth wonders how much longer she will be in this hell. Satanists continue to torment her, forcing her to summon evil spirits, but she does not want to suffer and dreams of salvation. Ashot, a mage from another world, must save Elizabeth. Her life is in danger, and hope rests with this mysterious man with violet eyes. Ashloth Vane, Enoch's mage, plays an important role in the story. He is both Elizabeth's benefactor and enemy, adding tension to their relationship. Ashaloth helps Elizabeth despite the threat he poses. Their complicated relationship creates an unpredictable dynamic. He cares for her, even feeds her, showing his contradictory nature, tender and cold at the same time. When Elizabeth is tired, Ashaloth puts her to bed, showing care and attention while hiding his real emotions. He buys her clothes, which leaves Elizabeth in shock. She doesn't understand why he wants them or how long it will take to try them on. Elizabeth is grateful to meet Ashaloth. His help and care makes her feel safe despite his nature. Despite the difficulties, their relationship grows warmer. Ashaloth and Elizabeth realize that their bond is not accidental and grows stronger. Elizabeth and Ashaloth stood amidst the storms discussing her ability to take care of children. She confirmed that she takes the best care of the girls. Elizabeth sensed a challenge coming and began to question her role as the protagonist of the story. A dark force began to speak to Elizabeth, causing her to doubt the reality of what was happening, but she continued to search for answers. The voices of doubt surrounded Elizabeth, causing her to desperately try to drown them out, but her fears only intensified. As she battled her fears, Elizabeth realized that her true test was just beginning, and she had to keep going. The question of whether she could overcome the obstacles became her guiding star, helping her find courage and resilience. Elizabeth, gathering all her will, overcame the obstacles and found new strength to fight dark magic. Determined to become a consummate sorceress, Elizabeth Lilly embarked on a path to greatness, vowing to protect the world. Ready for a new challenge, Elizabeth and Ashaloth realized that their determination could tame even an evil wizard. A new chapter of their story began with hope, courage, and faith in their strength. Elizabeth and Ashaloth entered the battle for the future. Elizabeth looked curiously at the blue book with gold ornamentation that was in the hands of the mysterious man. He said that this book was written especially for her, and the girl felt a thrill and excitement. Sitting on the man's lap, Elizabeth read the book with delight. She was especially drawn to the main character, which made her eyes light up with joy. The man smiled gently as he watched her reaction. The man confessed that the main character in the book was also his favorite. Elizabeth felt a special connection to the character, realizing that she and this man shared a common sentiment. The story continued. The main character of the book, Enoch Silas, was able to defeat the evil dragon and save the continent because he had the main character by his side. Elizabeth dived deeper and deeper into the story. The heroine of the book turned out to be the most brilliant sorceress in the world. She was the lover of Enoch, the crown prince of the empire. Her strength and determination impressed Elizabeth, inspiring her to do exploits. Elizabeth learned that this sorceress would soon become empress. She felt a surge of pride and hope, imagining how her own life could be tied to this great destiny. Reading on, Elizabeth discovered that the main character had the same name as her. This revelation excited her even more, as if fate had brought them together through this book. The man confirmed her hunch, saying that the main character in the book was her, Elizabeth. The girl was amazed, her heart filled with new dreams and hopes ready to be realized. Elizabeth, the girl with golden hair, has a nightmare again. She gets down on all fours, her eyes expressing fear and despair. This dream repeats itself, bringing back horrible memories. Elizabeth reflects on her importance, doubting that she is the protagonist. Her gaze expresses deep doubt and sadness. Elizabeth recalls her childhood in a small and peaceful village. She was happy with her parents. Everything around her was calm and joyful. Suddenly, devil-worshipping Satanists came to the village and killed all the inhabitants. The burning houses, the screams, and the chaos were memorable to her forever. The Satanists spared no one, killing everyone in their path. Elizabeth saw her loved ones die in terror and pain. Into this chaos, the spirits broke in. The Satanists were surprised and frightened, not expecting to encounter such supernatural forces. One of the Satanists finds a magic stone and rejoices, realizing its value. But they are troubled by the question of where the spirits came from. The Satanists learn of Elizabeth's ability to summon spirits and capture her. They surround her holding the magic stones, intending to subdue her will. Elizabeth thinks about being forced to summon spirits again. She is terrified and dreams of escaping, hoping to break free from the Satanists' captivity. Elizabeth pondered that if she were the protagonist of the book, she would be rescued, but realized that these were just fantasies. She realized that her reality was darker. Her life depended on the mercy of cruel Satanists who enjoyed her suffering. The Satanists in robes and masks demanded that she go out at midnight, calling her a slave and forcing her to obey. Elizabeth tried to resist, begging them to let go, but the Satanists dragged her roughly, ignoring her pleas. She was silenced by shouting that she was too noisy in order to cover her mouth, which increased her helplessness. Her fear increased when a Satanist grabbed her by her clothes, stating that they had enough bodies for the rituals, realizing the danger. She was forced to summon evil spirits, threatening her with death. Elizabeth realized that her life and the lives of others depended on her obedience. She saw the bodies of people killed by Satanists who made no distinction between adults and children. There were more and more victims. Her heart broke with pain and despair. She wondered how many more people must die and how long she would have to suffer. Elizabeth felt exhausted. Tears streamed down her face as she realized she could no longer bear the horror. Elizabeth, a young girl with golden hair, is in a state of anxiety, but a kind man comforts her by stroking her head affectionately. He tells her that she should not worry. Elizabeth learns that the protagonist will not appear right away. Her male escort explains that she is sure to be saved by a special person she meets. Masked Satanists invade their hideout. They notice the noise and launch an attack, trying to stop the intruders. A man assures Elizabeth that despite everything, that special person will surely save her. He takes a confident step forward, preparing to face his enemies. Elizabeth watches on, seeing one of the enemies fall, struck down by an unknown force. The Satanists shout in panic that the devil will protect them. A man's silhouette appears out of the darkness, the whole scene colored in ominous tones. Elizabeth immediately realizes that she has met the one who will save her. She remembers being told that he would be more beautiful than anyone she had ever seen. Seconds stretch into eternity as his figure becomes more discernible. Elizabeth realizes that this is the man who has come to save her. Her eyes glow with admiration and gratitude for his arrival. The sight of his beauty amazes her. He is like the embodiment of the Milky Way she once saw. Elizabeth is seized with a sense of deep awe before him. She recalls seeing something similar inside evil spirits, but it was not as beautiful as his. Elizabeth looks at his silhouette with admiration and hope. Ashot, the most powerful 12th grade battle mage and a student of the Yaxium school, is known as the destructive weapon and the Punisher. He is uncompromising and ruthless, which has made him famous among mages. As one of the associates of the mage Enoch, the protagonist of Walfer's story, Ashot gained a reputation as a soulless man. His cruelty and strength instilled fear in the hearts of many. Ashot was both a benefactor and an enemy to Elizabeth. She did not know how to feel about him, for he had saved her life, yet he was cold and cruel. Elizabeth hated her savior because of their horrible first meeting. He seemed like a threat to her, and she couldn't forgive him for the fear he caused. A frightened Elizabeth summoned evil spirits to attack Ashot when she felt in danger. The spirits were powerful, but they could not defeat the mage. It was pointless to resist. Ashot easily repelled the attack, which only made Elizabeth hate him more. She saw him as an enemy that was impossible to resist. Ashot wanted to kill Elizabeth not only because he disliked her, but also because summoning evil spirits is considered a serious crime that carries an immediate execution. But despite her fear, Elizabeth realized that Ashaloth would not harm her. He stopped and told her not to be afraid, which led to a change in their relationship. Elizabeth, scared and nervous, admits that she is still scared even though Ashalot asks about her love of candy. He tries to distract her, but she is clearly disturbed. Elizabeth realizes that what she has in front of her is precious lilac candy that can be used in place of magical potions. This realization shocks and frightens her. Elizabeth suspects that Ashalot wants to restore her magical powers for his own purposes. Her eyes widen with fear and bewilderment as she realizes Ashaloth's possible intentions. Ashalot, in an effort to reassure Elizabeth, offers her a lilac candy. Elizabeth is confused, her thoughts torn between fear and hope for his sincerity. Elizabeth, gathering her thoughts, replies that she speaks the state language. Her voice trembles as she announces her name, Elizabeth Lilly. Ashalot is surprised, realizing that the woman in front of him is an aristocrat. Elizabeth explains that she almost became a victim, but called upon evil spirits which saved her. She recalls being dragged into the place, realizing her mistake. Ashalot is surprised that Elizabeth did indeed summon evil spirits. He looks at her carefully, realizing that her abilities are much stronger than he had anticipated. Elizabeth tries to calm down, despite realizing that summoning evil spirits is a crime. She breathes heavily, feeling the weight of her responsibility. Elizabeth forcefully states that she has summoned evil spirits because she is a sorceress with the eye of truth. Her eyes burn with determination despite her fear and excitement. Elizabeth realizes that her power and responsibility go hand in hand. She is willing to embrace her abilities and use them for good despite the challenges. The ability to see a spirit's true name in essence is a rare and unique gift. Even the most experienced wizards spend decades to master the talent of understanding at a glance. Ashaloth wonders how Elizabeth knew there was an evil spirit in front of them. The girl, stammering slightly, replies that other people told her that. Ashalot asks Elizabeth if she has anything she would like to take with her. The girl, blushing and flustered, denies that she has anything. Elizabeth finds herself getting clean. She recalls from the book that this is purification magic. The restraint around her neck is gone, and she feels liberated. Elizabeth recalls that the book said that Ashaloth hates dirt. She shamefully suggests that she was so dirty that she needed cleansing. Elizabeth is amazed at how quickly they moved to the new place. She finds it hard to believe that they were transported here in the blink of an eye. Ashaloth informs Elizabeth that he is going to teleport again. The girl watches him warily, trying not to freak out at what is happening. Elizabeth worries that Ashaloth will get angry if she gets dirty again. She feels insecure and anxious. Ashalot asks Elizabeth to stretch out both arms. She is surprised and frightened, not realizing what is happening. Elizabeth fearfully ponders why Ashalot is asking her to extend her arms. The thought occurs to her that he will only let her go after he cuts off her arms, which causes her to panic. Elizabeth holds up the water that Ashalot gave her, explaining that it is purified water that she can drink. Elizabeth is surprised and looks at the water in her palms with excitement. Elizabeth thanks Ashalot and begins to drink the water, feeling it refresh her. Sitting on the grass under the night sky, she feels safe and at peace. Ashaloth, with a stern expression on his face, lifts Elizabeth into his arms, clearly preparing for another teleportation. Elizabeth is surprised and somewhat frightened, but feels secure in his arms. Ashalot walks over, holding Elizabeth in his arms. She feels his determination and care, feeling cozy and safe. Elizabeth wakes up and sees a bright light shining through the leaves. She wonders where the light is coming from in the cave and begins to worry about where Ashalot is. After looking around, Elizabeth realizes that Ashalot is not around. She begins to panic, thinking that he might have abandoned her. The wind rustles in the leaves, adding to the tension. Elizabeth grips Ashalot's cloak tightly, trying to convince herself that he couldn't have left her. She desperately wants to believe that he is near. In the original story, Elizabeth ran away from Ashalot, not trusting anyone because of her past. However, Ashalot quickly found her, showing his concern and determination to protect her. Elizabeth woke up and saw Ashalot standing nearby. He noticed her awakening and calmly walked closer. Ashalot was holding a bowl of hot soup and offered it to Elizabeth, telling her to eat. Elizabeth, surprised, asked where he got the food. Ashalot explained that he had bought the soup in a neighboring town and held it out to Elizabeth. She was still surprised by his action. Elizabeth wondered why Ashalot didn't take her to the town with him since he went there. She expressed it out loud, showing her resentment. Ashalot explained that her mana circle wouldn't be able to withstand teleportation magic, which was the reason she couldn't go with him. Elizabeth thought about his words for a moment. Elizabeth asked what a mana circle was, which caused Ashalot to wonder. He decided to explain the concept to her. Ashalot explained that each human soul has its own circle of mana. He drew a diagram to explain it more clearly. Ashalot continued that normally humans have a mana circle of 12 rings, but wizards can have 13. He showed Elizabeth her own mana circle. Elizabeth recognized that she only had 2 rings left. She was stunned by this discovery, trying to realize its significance. Ashalot explained that ordinary people die when their mana circle is so destroyed, but Elizabeth survived because she was a wizard. It saved her life. Elizabeth ponders her magical abilities, wondering why the shattered mana circle cannot withstand teleportation magic, even though she can use it. An image of the great sorceress from the book comes to her mind, who had no trouble casting magic even with a torn mana circle. Elizabeth doubts her powers. Ashalot, watching her, wonders if she should show her magical abilities on the street. Elizabeth feels insecure. A man appears in front of Elizabeth with 2 rings of mana. She realizes that this amount of magic is enough to teleport, but fears failure. Suddenly, the broken mana circle is subjected to a powerful force, and Elizabeth sees an explosion. She fears the same thing will happen to her when she teleports. She worries, thinking that she will fail because her powers are not yet at the level of a great sorceress. Her fears increase. Ashalot reassures her, explaining that the mana circle is restored naturally as her body heals, and advises her to eat. Elizabeth remembers being afraid of Ashalot, just as the heroine of the book was afraid of the wizard. She realizes that her fears are preventing her from reaching her potential. Elizabeth wonders if she can become a better person and overcome her fears. She realizes that only perseverance and belief in herself will help her. Ashalot, observing her musings, smiles demurely and assures her that she is on the right path. Elizabeth accepts his words and resolves to improve herself. Elizabeth was amazed to see the sheer number of people around. She hadn't expected such a busy place. Ashalot held her tightly, making her feel safe. The city they found themselves in was completely unfamiliar to Elizabeth. She wondered where they were, amazed at the sudden change of scenery. It had been a long time since Elizabeth had left Ashaloth. She had felt lost and alone all those days, but he had always been there to help her. When Elizabeth tried to do something on her own, Ashalot would carefully remind her to eat. She insisted on her independence, but his concern never faltered. Elizabeth remembered Ashaloth treating her with his magic when she was sick. His strength and attention to her had always made her grateful and admire him. Elizabeth could not understand how they had managed to reach such a large city, for she had fallen asleep in the forest. She wondered how long it had been since she had fallen asleep. Ashalot reassured her, telling her that not much time had passed. He explained that he had used magic to move her when her mana had recovered a bit. Elizabeth was surprised and interested in Ashaloth's explanation of the types of teleportation. He explained that he used a technique that connected 2 places without separating his body. When Ashalot saw that Elizabeth was trying to talk to him, he asked if she was having a hard time communicating with him. He worried that her questions might be uncomfortable. Elizabeth explained that she just wanted to understand everything thoroughly. She feared that he might be annoyed by her questions and offered to keep quiet if necessary. Ashalot warned Elizabeth that she would be bored and that she would have trouble understanding what he was talking about. Elizabeth, contrary to what he says, expresses a strong desire to know everything he has to say. She explains that she wants to become a great sorceress and intends to learn the basics of magic as soon as possible. Ashalot thinks she's a strange child, but her determination and enthusiasm pique his interest. Elizabeth admits that she doesn't even need to ask what she already knows, and she is genuinely curious to know his name. Ashalot finally gives his name, asking to be addressed simply by his first name. Ashalot warns Elizabeth not to say his name when there are people around. Elizabeth is surprised, but Ashalot explains that they are surrounded by a hostile government and that he is hated. The country they are in is ruled by immortal mages known as the Lich Elders. Ashalot explains that they hate him because he beheaded their ringleader, which explains his warning. Elizabeth, sitting in Ashalot's arms, asks where they are going now. Ashalot replied that they were going to buy clothes. The cat stomped along beside him, looking around warily. Elizabeth remembered that she had seen the pattern on the magic scroll Ashaloth was holding somewhere before. Memories flashed through her mind as she tried to grasp it. A gate appeared straight out of thin air. Ashalot, holding Elizabeth, used the magic scroll to open the passage. Elizabeth watched with admiration and wonder. At the store of magical items, they were greeted by a saleswoman. She smiled cordially and announced that they were in the Dutch branch of their department store. Ashalot asked to pick out some traveling clothes for Elizabeth. The girl was surprised to hear this and asked uncertainly if it was really for her. The salesperson, smiling happily, confirmed that it was travel clothes. Elizabeth was stunned by the attention and care shown to her. Following the saleswoman, Ashalot and Elizabeth entered the sales room. The saleswoman asked them to follow her to show them all the items they needed. Elizabeth stood a little embarrassed on the floor as the saleswoman asked Ashalot to put her on the ground. She was a little wary but obeyed. The saleswoman and her assistants began to take Elizabeth's measurements to pick out the perfect clothes for her. The girl was a little intimidated by the quick movements, but understood that it was necessary. After taking her measurements, the salesperson suggested that we begin the fitting. She smiled happily, and all around were hung beautiful outfits that Elizabeth was to try on. Elizabeth looked in horror at the racks of endless outfits, thinking that she would have to try on every single thing. She couldn't believe her eyes and felt confused. Ashalot grudgingly examined the offered outfits, finding them too few. His irritation was growing, and he began to wonder if there was anything suitable for Elizabeth. The vendor offered more clothes with a smile, saying that they were clearly not enough. Elizabeth, in tears, assured him that the outfits were more than enough for her. Elizabeth, clutching her head, realized that trying on all those outfits would take forever. She was overwhelmed by the amount of clothes on offer and didn't know how to deal with it. Enosh, obsessed with Elizabeth's care, bought her everything in sight. However, Elizabeth invariably rejected his attempts to please her, leaving him in despair. The salesman would happily show off a gorgeous dress, claiming it was the latest fashion. His enthusiasm knew no bounds, and he continued to praise his wares. The next set of clothes the salesman also considered popular. He assured that the colors were perfect for Elizabeth, accentuating her beauty. Elizabeth looked tiredly at the racks filled with clothes, realizing that there were too many. She felt overwhelmed at having to try on all these outfits. The salesman explained that each set had special charms placed on them to make them comfortable to wear. Elizabeth listened to him in confusion, not knowing what to say. Ashalot, looking at Elizabeth, asked if she liked anything. Elizabeth felt immense pressure, realizing that choosing an outfit for her had turned into a real challenge. Elizabeth, clasping her hands together, hesitantly asks if the items in the store are too expensive. She looks a little embarrassed, which makes her gestures seem awkward. The clerk smilingly assures Elizabeth that the store's prices are quite reasonable, trying to reassure her and let her know that she need not worry about the cost. Ashalot, noticing Elizabeth's concern, assures her that he would have no trouble buying the entire store if necessary, which inspires her confidence. Elizabeth, scrutinizing the merchandise, thinks about how they are all beautiful but don't look like traveling clothes. She's a little pensive. Observing Elizabeth's reaction, the salesman concludes that she didn't like anything. Ashalot notes how fastidious the lady is, which brings a slight smile to their faces. The vendor, excitedly showing the next item, assures Elizabeth that she is very lucky. She talks about the magical properties of the goods, which surprises Elizabeth. Elizabeth is delighted and amazed at the magical capabilities of the goods, and the seller continues to praise the goods, showing a small purse that can be carried on her person. Ashalot decisively declares that they take the goods and ask for more clothes. Elizabeth is stunned by this decision and Ashalot's sudden generosity. The vendor cheerfully thanks them for their purchase, standing in front of a table in which many gift boxes are neatly stacked, glistening in the light. Elizabeth, looking at the mountain of purchases, ponders that they bought too much stuff, and she thinks that Ashalot just likes shopping, which makes her smile slightly. The salesman asks Elizabeth what to do with the new clothes, to wrap them up or to wear them right away. Elizabeth decides to wear it right away, waiting for the magic to happen. The salesman smiles and invites Elizabeth to follow her. Elizabeth is a little nervous, but follows the salesman, feeling a sense of anticipation. The salesman shows Elizabeth a place where she can change her clothes. Elizabeth is visibly nervous but ready for a new experience. The surrounding atmosphere is mysterious. From backstage, a mysterious voice is heard announcing a full moon and urging her to come out. Elizabeth freezes in anticipation, her heart beating faster. The voice threatens that if the evil spirits are not summoned, disaster will happen. Elizabeth is gripped with fear, but her resolve grows stronger. Elizabeth, trembling, asks permission to negotiate from afar. Ashalot watches, realizing the importance of the moment. Ashalot reassures Elizabeth, explaining that it is simple. She will only need to respond. Elizabeth feels a little more confident. Elizabeth offers to clap her hands if she has trouble speaking. She doesn't want to show her fear, but her insecurity is noticeable. Magic happens. Elizabeth sees her disguise with magic. Her face lights up with delight and wonder. Ashalot uses a magic sign explaining that all the clothes are enchanted. Elizabeth is delighted by what she sees. Her heart fills with joy and amazement. Elizabeth and Ashalot, having finished shopping, are about to leave. Ashalot orders the bill from the vendor. Elizabeth hugs him tenderly, which shows her affection. The vendor records all purchases with a smile to the Aragald Mage Association. Elizabeth and Ashalot watch her as they prepare to leave. Elizabeth recalls a woman who seemed to recognize Ashalot because of her use of magic. She begins to worry about the consequences, but Ashalot reassures her. Elizabeth worries that the woman will tell the elders of the faces what happened. Ashalot is doubtful since the woman works in trade and will not want to lose profits. Suddenly, a magical symbol appears in front of them. Elizabeth is shocked, not believing her eyes. This event causes them strong emotions and anxiety. Ashalot decides it is best to read his memories to explain the situation. Elizabeth is surprised, as Ashalot hates mental magic, but agrees. Ashalot begins to show his memories. Red energy glides through the air. Elizabeth watches with curiosity and anxiety, waiting to see what happened. Details of sectarians in Deciphering taking over the ancient ruins come to mind. This information makes Elizabeth anxious and interested, heightening the drama of what is happening. Elizabeth, with golden hair, suddenly finds herself in an unknown place. She doesn't realize where she is, and it frightens her. The place where she is seems dark and ominous. Words are spread around her saying that here she will become a miserable slave. Elizabeth is horrified to realize that this is the same place where she was once a slave. She cannot believe her eyes, for she thought she was free from this dungeon. She convinces herself that this cannot be true, for she has managed to escape. Elizabeth relives all the horrors she has experienced. However, a dark voice assures her that it's all true. He asks if she believes it and starts laughing, making her doubt it. Elizabeth screams into the void, asking who is in front of her. The voice replies that it doesn't matter, reminding her of her past suffering. The voice goes on to say that she is just some farmer's daughter and cannot be a great sorceress. It mocks her past. Elizabeth, unable to stand it, argues that this is not true. She reminds herself that she has the eye of truth, which gives her power. The voice claims that her eye of truth has already destroyed many people and spirits. Elizabeth realizes that she will have to fight this evil in order to finally free herself. Elizabeth, a girl with golden hair, cries out in tears that she didn't kill them, desperately trying to prove her innocence. A voice in her head orders her to listen, calling her by name. Elizabeth stands to her feet, surrounded by an ominous red and black background. The voice continues to press her, telling her that her thoughts are nothing but nonsensical nonsense. Elizabeth, gripped by panic, stubbornly refuses to believe what is happening despite the apparent pressure. She calls herself Elizabeth Lilly, trying to maintain her remnants of sanity. Elizabeth, holding a knife and fork, encounters a mysterious butterfly symbolizing hope and resistance in the face of adversity. She tries to stay strong no matter what. Alarmed, Elizabeth begins to doubt herself and her thoughts. She thinks that everything could be true, just as that voice told her. Sitting alone in the dark room, Elizabeth begins to wonder if everything around her is just her illusion, and she is still languishing inside that cave. Suddenly, her thoughts are interrupted by the realization that Ashalot rescued her from there. She begins to wonder where he is now. Elizabeth stretches her arms forward in the darkness, calling out to Ashalot in desperation. Her voice trembles with fear and helplessness as she asks him to answer. When Ashalot appears, Elizabeth bursts into his arms, sobbing and confessing that she is scared in the dark and that she does not like being alone. Elizabeth explains to Ashalot how she woke up in a dark room and didn't find him around, which made her panic. Her fears intensified when she realized she was all alone. Elizabeth begged Ashalot to stay with her, desperately clinging to his shirt. Tears glistened in her eyes and her voice shook with emotion and fear of being alone. Ashalot put his arm around Elizabeth and asked if she was afraid of him, warning her that he wasn't as good as she thought he was. Their closeness reflected the deep connection and trust between them. Elizabeth, through tears, assured Ashalot that he was a good man despite his doubts. Her voice trembled, but her eyes read a sincere belief in his goodness. Not only was Ashaloth a cold-blooded man, but he was Enoch's only companion who never expected a reward for his actions. This emphasized his nobility and selflessness. When Elizabeth was in trouble, Ashaloth, despite their complicated relationship, was the first to come to her aid, demonstrating his willingness to sacrifice himself for others. Elizabeth deviated from her destiny, changing the course of history. Important moments in her life intersected with the fate of other characters, changing everything around her. Elizabeth tearfully continued to assure that Ashalot was indeed a good person. Her words were filled with emotion and sincerity, reflecting her belief in his goodness. Ashalot sat next to the bed of a sleeping Elizabeth who had cried so much the previous night. His care and attention to her spoke of deep affection. He reflected on the fact that if even one ring of mana was restored, much could change. His face reflected sadness and regret at not being able to change the situation. Ashalot and Elizabeth held hands, leaving only one thing to hope for. Their bond and support for each other was the last light in the dark times, emphasizing the strength of their unity. Elizabeth was in poor health, and Vassal regrets not being called sooner. Ashalot remarks that things would have been much worse without Vassal. Elizabeth is barely on her feet. Ashalot demands that Vassal cure Elizabeth without further ado. Vassal replies that it's not that simple and takes time, as haste is not always good. Elizabeth is warned not to look at what is happening because she is not yet fully recovered and her eyes might strain. Vassal reassures Elizabeth, promising to heal her completely. He says that when she opens her eyes again, much will change. Elizabeth slowly comes to her senses. She is surprised and doesn't understand what is happening when she sees Ashaloth in front of her. Vasil notices that Elizabeth can see what should be invisible and marvels at her abilities, assuming her eyes are unusual. Vassal is delighted having finally met a gifted child. Elizabeth is startled, not realizing that there is a snake in front of her and feels fear. Elizabeth is afraid and asks that the snake not come near her. Vasil tries to calm her down by calling her a good girl. Elizabeth, scared and tired, covers her eyes with her hands, screaming for the snake to stay away. She feels vulnerable and helpless. Vasilos appears to Elizabeth, declaring his intention to be her friend. His confidence and kindness attracts the girl's attention, despite his demonic origin. He continues by telling her of his intentions to become her guardian and teacher. His concern and desire to help becomes clear, creating a sense of security for Elizabeth. Elizabeth is shocked when she learns that the snake has turned into a human. Her surprise and fear overwhelm her when she realizes that Vasilos is the same snake. She begins to remember where she has heard that name before. Vasilos suggests she just call him Vasil and her Ellie, emphasizing their new connection. Vasilos patiently teaches her how to pronounce his name correctly, showing his friendliness and concern. This helps Elizabeth feel more confident in his presence. Vasilos, the head of the Mages Guild and demon contracted to the first mage Athanasia, reveals his history. His experience and knowledge impress Elizabeth, strengthening her trust in him. Ashaloth appears in the room, confirming that Elizabeth is awake. His calmness and confidence complement Vasilos's presence, creating a protective circle around the girl. Elizabeth hides behind Ashalot, feeling protected. She has conflicting feelings about Vasilos, but realizes that he will not harm her. Ashalot expresses his concern by asking if Vasilos has done something bad to Elizabeth. His concern and wariness emphasize his devotion to the girl. Vasilos resents Ashalot's suspicions, explaining that his intentions were misunderstood. He hopes that Elizabeth and Ashalot can understand and trust him so that they can work together to protect and educate the girl. Vasilos proudly announces that Allie's body is fully restored. He confidently declares his magical abilities, comparing them to magical hands. Elizabeth questions whether the damaged parts of her body have been repaired. Vasilos confirms, adding that he does indeed possess magic hands. Vasilos reveals that Elizabeth now has no hand. Her broken teeth have been replaced with whole ones, and even her stutter has disappeared. Elizabeth marvels at how clearly she speaks now. While Elizabeth slept, she was moved around a bit. She wakes up in a new place and is perplexed as to why she is in a different room. Vasilos explains that they are in a town on the border between Alpania and Holland. Soon they will be traveling by airship to Aragald. Aragald is a city of mages. Vasilos introduces himself as the president of the Aragald Mages Association and Ashaloth's godparent. Vasilos notices that Ashaloth probably hasn't introduced himself and explains that Ashaloth is a 12th class battle mage. Ashaloth sits quietly, not paying attention to the conversation. Elizabeth is facing trial in Aragalda for summoning low-level evil spirits. She looks worried about the upcoming trial. Elizabeth recalls the summoning of evil spirits and realizes that it put her in this situation. She regrets her actions. Vasilos comforts Elizabeth, telling her that she is a special child and not to worry. He looks at her with tenderness and confidence in her future. Elizabeth thanks Vasilos for the explanation and for fixing her body. She bows her head in sincere appreciation, even though this is all happening in a fake world. Vasilos enthusiastically calls Elizabeth polite and asks if she likes her new body. He offers to make her his apprentice if she is pleased, but it is only an illusion. Vasilos offers Elizabeth to sign the apprentice-teacher contract right on his arm, laughing and pointing to his forearm, even though they are both in a fake reality. Elizabeth abruptly rejects the offer, surprising Vasilos. He cries out in desperation at the cruelty, and Elizabeth rejects his overreaching persistence in this world of illusion. Ashaloth, watching, intervenes and demands that Vasilos take his hands off Elizabeth. He protects her from her over-insistence in this fake world. Sitting on his throne, Ashaloth coldly asks Vasilos to disappear as his help is no longer needed. He makes it clear that he no longer wishes to have him around in this illusion. Vasilos refuses to leave, resenting the fact that Ashaloth thinks that he will leave Elizabeth only at his command. His resolve to be by her side remains firm despite the false setting. Elizabeth suddenly declares that she is fine with Vasilos staying with them, eliciting his admiration and joy. All of this takes place in a fake world. Ashaloth is surprised to note that Elizabeth and Vasilos seem quite close. Elizabeth smiles embarrassedly, not knowing what to say, even though they are in a world of illusion. Ashaloth looks in surprise at Vasilos, who points at Elizabeth, perplexed as to how they could be close. Vasilos is embarrassed and tries to hide his laughter as he recalls their previous conversations. Elizabeth, embarrassed by Ashaloth's words, hides her face behind the back of her chair. The girl assures him that she and Vasilos are indeed close, despite his hesitancy and casual demeanor. Vasilos, blushing and hiding his face, admits that he likes Elizabeth more and more. This situation causes him internal conflict, but his feelings become more and more obvious. Ashaloth carries Elizabeth in his arms, surveying the surroundings and noting that the place looks more like a fortress than a city. Elizabeth clings to him, marveling at his determination. Elizabeth asks Ashaloth a question about why people carry swords. Ashaloth explains to her that it has to do with the threat from rotting bones, which causes the girl to be even more surprised. The image of a skeleton in a robe appears, causing Elizabeth fear and confusion. She realizes that it is a lich elder who brings terror to those around him. Ashaloth continues to explain to Elizabeth that the armed men are either mercenaries or evil spirit hunters who make their living selling the corpses of evil spirits to necromancers. Elizabeth notices that Ashaloth's voice has changed dramatically and asks if he hates evil spirit hunters. Ashaloth, however, claims that they are not even worthy of his hatred, expressing his contempt for them. Vasil, in his serpent form, confirms Ashaloth's words, adding that he really can't stand them. Ashaloth looks calm and determined as he continues on his way. Ashaloth relates the problem of people disregarding the Great Compact in an effort to make money by selling holy stones and the corpses of evil spirits. Hunters kill spirits in normal regions with no problem, but hunting in polluted areas is a serious danger and is discussed separately. On the border between Alpenia and Howland is a heavily polluted region known as the Great Forest, which is full of dangers. Many governments forbid entry into this forest as the level of magical pollution can increase dramatically, posing a threat. Necromancers in this region practice magic using corpses as fuel, attracting people who want to get their hands on the corpses of evil spirits at any cost. Hunters use the forest as a base, earning huge sums of money from selling their prey, which resembles a dumpster full of swarming bugs. The corpses of evil spirits emit negative energy, which leads to cleaning up polluted areas or burning the corpses to get rid of that energy. The problem is that cleaning is too expensive and incineration takes away the profits from selling the corpses, making the choice difficult for the authorities. Elizabeth wonders why Ashaloth killed one of the Lich elders, suspecting it has to do with the actions in the Great Forest. Ashaloth suggests that the elders were trying to capture more holy stones and corpses of evil spirits, disregarding the treaty and risking human lives. Elizabeth, surprised and a bit confused, brings up the broken promise. She refers to a book that says Ashaloth fought only those who went against the Great Treaty. Vassal responds enthusiastically to Elizabeth's clever words, encouraging her and offering to learn something more. He is filled with admiration and tenderness for her, which is expressed in the hearts around him. Elizabeth raises her hand to ask a question. She clearly wants to know more and is not shy about showing her inquisitiveness, eager to learn more. She turns to Ashaloth, reminding him of the importance of secrecy, as the protector of the Great Treaty must not openly show his face. Elizabeth is surprised that he does not hide and suggests the influence of magic. Ashaloth explains that he used a stealth spell that causes the part of the brain responsible for recognizing faces to malfunction. Thus, people are unable to identify him. Ashaloth reveals that he reduced the effect of the spell for a more natural disguise, and now they blend into the crowd without attracting attention. Elizabeth happily confirms that her assumptions were correct. Vassal praises her genius and raises her self-esteem, reminding her that she is indeed intelligent. Ashaloth marvels at her ability to absorb information quickly and her excellent memory. He notes that her inquisitiveness is a good trait, especially if she wants to become a mage. Vassal, a little annoyed by Ashaloth's doubt, assures him that Elizabeth will definitely become a mage. He expresses his support and faith in her abilities. Elizabeth, smiling, agrees with Vassal, but adds that this is only possible if everything works out. She is full of optimism and confidence in her abilities. Elizabeth and Ashaloth find themselves in a store of magical goods. Elizabeth was attracted to a shining cube with patterns, and she offered to buy it. Ashaloth marveled at the choice. Elizabeth was puzzled as to why Ashaloth saw the cube as an ordinary battle golem. She marveled at its magical nature, and the cube continued to glow. The vendor explained that the cube golem in front of them looked like this before activation. He offered to touch it, but Ashaloth was wary. Elizabeth gingerly took the cube in her hands and felt that it was warmer and heavier than it appeared. She was amazed to feel the living magic within. Vassal, in snake form, vehemently objected to the purchase, calling the cube useless junk. He felt that something else would be better suited for Elizabeth. Vassal pointed to a dainty hairpin and offered to buy it instead of the cube. He thought the hairpin would be more to Elizabeth's liking and would be more useful to her. The salesman assured her that the hairpin was safe and made of tempered glass that would not break into large shards. He was confident in its reliability. Ashaloth wondered how the choice of hairpin might affect Elizabeth's safety. The salesman assured her that the hairpin would not harm her, and it was indeed beautiful. Elizabeth looked at Ashaloth and felt doubt, but his encouragement strengthened her. He asked if she wanted the hairpin, and Elizabeth hesitated. Elizabeth accepted the hairpin, and Ashaloth noticed how it suited her. He was glad he had made the right choice, seeing the joy on Elizabeth's face. Elizabeth, lying in bed, felt uncomfortable with the hairpin in her hair. Ashaloth, noticing her discomfort, offered to remove it before going to bed, but Elizabeth, despite trying, could not fall asleep. Ashaloth, concerned about her insomnia, urged her not to force herself to fall asleep. Elizabeth explained that she tried, but sleep would not come. Ashaloth asked if she was in pain, to which Elizabeth replied that it wasn't that. She began to express her deep worries and concerns. A thought flashed through her mind. What if it was all just a beautiful dream? This fear suddenly came over her, adding more worries. Ashaloth tried to reassure her, explaining that even accidentally summoning demons was not considered a crime if it was unintentional. Elizabeth shouldn't worry about it. Elizabeth tried to explain that it wasn't what she was worried about. Her hands shook as she tried to express her true worries. Ashaloth asked if she wanted to become a mage, but Elizabeth, with desperation in her voice, said she couldn't be anything other than herself. Elizabeth was worried that nothing else would work out for her, even if she tried. She felt that her only path was to become a sorceress, since she was given a talent for magic. Elizabeth's mistakes in the book had serious consequences. Her first attempt to escape from Ashaloth and abandoning her path as a magician for the aristocratic family that adopted her were her fatal mistakes. Elizabeth, lying in bed, questions Ashaloth as to why he does not want her to become a mage. She is surprised and has mixed feelings about it. Ashalot, looking reserved and reluctant, did not suggest Elizabeth become a wizard. This makes her wonder what he is hiding. Elizabeth recalls moments when Ashalot did not try to convince her to become a wizard despite her desire. She reflects on his behavior. Ashalot claims that he did not mean that Elizabeth should not be a mage. His words sounded ambiguous, and Elizabeth cannot understand his true intentions. Ashalot warns that once chosen, there is no turning back, which makes Elizabeth think about the seriousness of the situation and the possible consequences of her decisions. Elizabeth realizes that she needs to let go of thoughts of not being able to become a mage. She decides that no matter what, she must follow her path. Elizabeth thinks that she is not running away from her destiny. She just wants to follow her own path without looking back at what others expect of her. Elizabeth decides that no matter what happens, she will still become a sorceress. She's confident in her abilities and ready to take on any challenge. Ashalot reveals to Elizabeth the secret of her eyes, that they have special properties. This discovery leads Elizabeth to new thoughts about her path. Elizabeth realizes that Ashalot intentionally did not tell her about the properties of her eyes. She realizes that all of his actions were intended for her to make her own decisions about her future. Elizabeth is terrified to discover that Ashalot knows all about her secret. She worries that her lies will be exposed and he will be disappointed in her, which causes her anxiety and panic. She ponders how long ago Ashalot could have guessed her secret and how long he has remained silent. She dreads thinking about his reaction and how it will affect their relationship. Elizabeth is afraid that Ashalot will hate her for the lies she has kept from him. She feels guilt and fear of losing his trust and intimacy that they have managed to develop. She thinks back to their relationship in the book where things were simpler and clearer. They were close there, and she wants those feelings back, but she realizes that reality is more complicated. Ashalot calms Elizabeth down, showing that he's not angry with her. He tells her that he's not worried about what she's hiding and asks her to stop trembling and worrying. Elizabeth is surprised that Ashalot knows all about her secret. She asks him if he used magic to read her mind, but he denies it, explaining that he simply noticed her inept attempts to hide the truth. Ashalot admits that mental magic is not his forte. He explains that she was simply too inept at hiding her emotions and secrets, and so he figured it out without magic. Ashalot says that Elizabeth trusted him immediately, despite meeting him for the first time. He admires her trust and the simplicity with which she relied on him. Elizabeth, hugging her pillow, asks Ashalot why he was so good to her if he knew everything. He replies that he wasn't doing anything special, just taking care of her as usual. Ashalot emphasizes that having secrets is not a crime, and her abilities are not a threat to him. He reassures Elizabeth, showing that her fears are unfounded, and there is no reason to worry. The man with black hair, Ashalot, carefully reassured Elizabeth, promising her that he was not angry and advising her to rest before tomorrow, when they would have to leave on the flying ship. Elizabeth felt supported and cared for in his words. Ashalot is sincere, his words instilling calmness in Elizabeth's heart. She feels within herself that he is truly sincere, and it gives her strength. There is a quiet confidence and support around him. Elizabeth, lying in bed, asks Ashalot if she can keep her secret from telling him. Ashalot, with kindness in his voice, asked if she really wanted to keep it a secret that badly. Elizabeth realized that Ashalot had probably already guessed her secret. His understanding and tolerance helped her feel more comfortable and confident in that moment. Elizabeth realizes that she can't tell everything right now, but she decides to share some things, feeling Ashalot's support. This gives her confidence and helps her open up some of her experiences. She promises to try to make sure that Ashalot never regrets meeting her. These words from Elizabeth sound sincere and heartfelt, expressing her gratitude and determination. Elizabeth thanks Ashalot for pretending to know nothing, thus showing her care and respect for her privacy. Her gratitude sparks in his eyes and smile. Elizabeth, amazed by the sight, sees the air tower with flying ships for the first time, which causes her indescribable amazement. Her golden eyes shine with delight. Ashalot, embracing Elizabeth, greets the approaching man. His calmness and confidence is palpable even from a distance, and Elizabeth reacts with surprise. The man smiles and asks if they are members of the Aragald Mage Association. His friendliness brings a slight smile to Elizabeth's face. The interlocutor continues, noting Ashalot's amazing skills in stealth magic. He admits to recognizing him, but newcomers wouldn't stand a chance. Ashalot, watching the movers, asks if the flying ship is ready to depart. His violet eyes strain in anticipation of the answer. The man confirms that loading is in full swing and offers to escort them to their quarters. His sincerity and openness bribes. Elizabeth notices the magic crystals floating in the air. Her voice is filled with delight and wonder at this magical sight. The man explains that they call these crystals membranes. His seriousness emphasizes the importance of these magical artifacts. He continues telling them that the membranes attract objects of a certain size to prevent flying ships from colliding and to keep the air tower running smoothly. Elizabeth asks why the air tower is even needed. Vasile, in snake form, replies that the membranes also energize the magic crystals aboard the ships so they can fly into the air. The pink snake, Vasile, resents that his body was used to create some nonsense. Elizabeth wonders if it is his body and tries to figure out what he means. Ashot, seeing that the conversation is taking an unnecessary turn, cuts it off abruptly. He warns Elizabeth that she should be more careful in the future if she is going to enter the workshops. The man with brown hair is surprised to notice that his explanation seems to have bored his interlocutors. He clearly did not expect such a reaction and looks confused. Elizabeth is utterly shocked when she learns that Ashaloth is really just an illusion created by magic. Only she and Vasile can see him, which surprises the girl even more. Elizabeth embraces Ashaloth, who appears to her as a formidable and powerful battle mage. Mikhail observes this scene closely and asks Ashaloth to tell her about himself. Mikhail introduces himself, informing her that he is a 5th-class battle mage and the best mage of the 2nd Magic Platoon of the Empire of Alpenia. His words sound proud and confident. Mikhail explains that the ship is carrying experimental combat equipment, and he is here to escort it and ensure the safety of the cargo. Mikhail wonders what exactly the Alliance told Ashaloth about him. He clearly wants to know what information was passed on about him to the other members of the mission. Mikhail informs him that he was assigned to assist the assisting 7th-class mage in finding a ship to Aragald. He adds that he was told that this man would be able to endure the risky voyage with no problem. Mikhail wonders if he has been misled about his mission. He promises to do his best to find another ship if Ashaloth and Elizabeth's expectations are not met. Elizabeth reflects on the fact that Ashaloth, a 7th-grade assisting mage, does not know who she really is. She is concerned that his knowledge could jeopardize her plans. Ashaloth asks what will happen if he abandons the mission after they are already on their way. He feels doubt and uncertainty about the success of their task. Michael, with a smile on his face, assures Ashaloth that they can handle everything on their own if he decides to abandon the mission. He shows his confidence in his own abilities and those of the team. Michael opens the door and invites everyone into the room, saying they can take over. He is hospitable and wants to create a comfortable environment for his teammates. Elizabeth, surprised and delighted, notices that they don't just have quarters, but actual rooms. She is amazed at the level of comfort and care provided by the crew. Vasile, looking at Ashaloth, asks why he is so unsociable. He is surprised that Ashaloth is so aloof from the other mages and not eager to socialize. Elizabeth is shocked to discover that Vasile has transformed and asks when he had time to do so. She is stunned by his abilities and the sudden transformation. Vasile, glaring angrily at Ashaloth, remarks that it is no good messing around with those who have no talent. He shows his dislike and frustration towards those who do not reach his level of skill. Ashaloth replies that, unlike some, he doesn't avoid talking, he's just too lazy to talk. He claims that the untalented kids are better off not seeing him, lest they be blinded by his talents. Elizabeth reassures Vasile, saying that she knows he has a heart of gold. She hugs him, showing her care and appreciation, and convinces him not to be angry. Vasile hugs Elizabeth, expressing his wish for her to stay as sweet as she is and become a wonderful sorceress. Elizabeth promises to try her best. Elizabeth ponders the magic of the 5th graders, marveling at their power. The book says that such mages are among the elite of the country, which seems strange to her. Michael appears and introduces himself as pendis. Elizabeth wonders where she might have heard that name. She recalls seeing the name in a book, but can't remember the details. Elizabeth begins to wonder if the name might have an important meaning. Michael, meanwhile, smiles, creating an atmosphere of friendliness and openness. Elizabeth and Vasile enjoy their trip on the flying ship, looking out the window at the picturesque city. Their joy and anticipation of new adventures becomes palpable. Vassal decides to forget about Michael, believing that he did not play an important role in their story. However, this only increases the intrigue and desire to learn more about Michael. Michael introduces Elizabeth and Vassal to the ship's crew. The meeting with the captain and his crew takes place in a friendly atmosphere, creating a sense of unity. Elizabeth enjoys a delicious meal while Ashot remains indifferent. The heroine's emotions emphasize her simplicity and directness. Elizabeth has fun on the ship, walking around and exploring. Her enthusiasm and joy are conveyed to the reader, creating a positive mood. Elizabeth and Vasile, surrounded by new friends and support, continue their exciting journey, full of anticipation of new adventures and discoveries. Elizabeth, sitting in Ashot's arms, complains that she is bored and has nothing to do. Michael sees this and is shocked by their behavior. Ashot keeps a serious expression on his face. Mikhail suggests going out on the deck, noting that there is a strong wind, but a beautiful view. Ashot, holding Elizabeth, declines, deeming it too dangerous. Michael, seeing that Elizabeth is sad, complains that his heart bleeds when he sees sad children. Ashot remains adamant, believing it is dangerous. Michael apologizes for the lack of interesting entertainment and offers to treat Elizabeth to the sweets he bought for his daughters. He hopes it will cheer her up. Elizabeth is surprised to learn that Michael already has children, even though he looks to be in his early 20s. She can't believe he has daughters. Mikhail explains that he is 40 years old and has long been the father of 2 daughters. The oldest is 7 years old and the youngest is 5. He notices that Elizabeth and his daughters are about the same age. Elizabeth is surprised to learn that she and Michael's daughters are the same age, even though she herself is only 10 years old. This raises many questions and surprises her. Elizabeth admits that she looked the same as her friends when she was 5 but didn't eat much, which explains her diminutive stature. Ashot is puzzled by this confession. Michael laughs and reassures Elizabeth, telling her that his daughters were skinny at first too, but are now the biggest and strongest in the village. This lifts Elizabeth's spirits. Michael remarks that his daughters would make excellent generals. Elizabeth is surprised by this characterization and begins to look at Michael and his daughters differently. Elizabeth recalls an important story from the past that concerned her. She suddenly realized that she knew what it was about, which surprised and alarmed her greatly. The story told of General Pendis, a servant of the empire and a battle mage. His strength and power was respected by all. He was a formidable warrior and mage. The book mentioned a girl who lost her father in a battle with a lich in Holland. This was Elizabeth, and she remembered this detail because of her personal connection. Elizabeth decided to join the front to avenge her father. She was determined and burning with the desire to defeat the Leek elder who killed her father. Michael noticed that something was wrong with Elizabeth. He asked her if she was all right, for she looked very worried and pale. Elizabeth was startled to realize that they were in Holland's territory. Thoughts of a possible encounter with the enemy flashed through her mind. She tried to calm herself by clutching the amulet in her hands. Elizabeth trusted that Ashot would protect her, for he was near. Michael speculated that the gravity control might have gone astray, which could be the reason for Elizabeth's anxious state. He tried to make sense of the situation. Mikhail ran to the wheelhouse to help put things in order. He instructed Elizabeth and Ashot to take cover to keep themselves safe. Suddenly, Vasile attacked in snake form, and Mikhail was shocked. Elizabeth realized that one of the Lich elders was in front of them, and it was a horrible revelation to her. Elizabeth frightenedly exclaims that she knows nothing, claiming that it is just a coincidence. However, the situation escalates when Ashot activates a magical symbol on the ground, causing alarm and excitement. Ashot doesn't believe in coincidences, recalling that an enemy he once beheaded attacked their ship as soon as they crossed into neutral territory. This seems too suspicious to him. Elizabeth continues to assure him that it wasn't her fault, but Ashot emphasizes that the enemy knew of their presence. If they were truly in danger, the consequences would have been far more serious. Ashot decides that they need to leave the place immediately to avoid further attacks. Vassal, transformed into a pink snake, listens intently and observes what is happening. Elizabeth, holding on to Ashot, feels safe. Ashot explains to her that if he, the defender of the Grand Treaty, intervenes in the conflict, it could escalate into an international problem between Alpenia and Holland. Elizabeth is concerned and asks what is going on, sensing danger. Her eyes are full of fear and bewilderment. She feels the situation is getting out of control. Ashalot reassures her, telling her that she is in no danger because he is there for her. His reassurance gives Elizabeth a sense of security, despite the anxiety of the moment. Elizabeth still doesn't understand why their ship is being attacked. She is genuinely puzzled by what is happening and cannot find an explanation for this sudden attack. Suddenly, the scene turns bloody when one of their enemies, Michael, dies. Blood splatters around, emphasizing the brutality and suddenness of his death. An observer of the events ponders why it is worth memorizing the death of a minor character. The story is just beginning, and this moment is only part of a larger plot that has yet to unfold. Elizabeth, with her hand on her chest, reflects on the fact that perhaps she could have made a difference. However, a voice in her head mocks her doubts, indicating that her efforts are pointless. A dark figure in a black context explains that the protagonist should never sacrifice herself for a secondary character. She advises Elizabeth to reflect on this. The figure continues his monologue, stating that the minor character must die because it is inevitable in the story. His death is necessary for the story to progress. Elizabeth sadly realizes that such a sacrifice may indeed be necessary for the plot, and wonders if it is really worth turning a blind eye for the sake of progress. With golden eyes, Elizabeth convinces him that it's not worth it to leave the battlefield for her. She is determined not to let anyone suffer because of her. Michael, the brown-haired mage, exclaims that Elizabeth never just gives up. He inspires her to keep fighting. Elizabeth asks Ashalot to help them. She relies on his strength and skills to handle the difficulties that have arisen and save everyone. Michael notices in a panic that the fog is still not clearing. He's concerned that the situation is out of control and danger is still near. The captain of the ship demands to pick up speed to get away from the demon chasing them. Mikhail tries to explain that the ship cannot move, that they are trapped. Mikhail realizes that if it were a mid-level demon, they would have made it by now. But since the ship can't move, it means their enemy is much more powerful than he realized. A huge demonic creature appears, filling the space with purple energy and lightning. The team realizes they are facing a demon of the highest order. Mikhail is concerned that their opponents are after experimental battle gear. He is surprised that their crew is facing such a powerful enemy. One of the crew members grimly states that their chances of survival are slim to none. He concludes that doom awaits them all, despite their best efforts. Another warrior decides not to give up without a fight. He declares that an Imperial soldier cannot die without a fight and is ready to fight to the end. Grabbing his weapon, the warrior prepares to attack. He is full of rage and determined to take revenge on the demon, not retreating until he has destroyed the enemy with his own hands. Mikhail realizes that the demon is also after the experimental equipment. He ponders the seriousness of their situation and doubts their success. The demon menacingly shouts Ashalot's name, suspecting him of collaborating with the Empire and demanding an explanation. His eyes are full of hatred. Ashalot defends Elizabeth, saying that his actions are not connected to the Empire. He tells the demon that he simply hates him, showing concern for the girl. The demon claims that they never violated the terms of the Grand Pact and demands an explanation as to why Ashalot hates them. Ashalot scornfully replies that he hates to see a creature with no brains talking. He is firm in his resolve to destroy the demon. Ashalot saves Elizabeth using magic and thanks Mikhail for his help. Mikhail is shocked to have personally met Ashalot, a student of the Axum school, and expresses his honor. Ashalot informs Mikhail that the head of the opposing forces, Centaur Balzac, will be arriving soon and asks him to prepare for the meeting. Mikhail is puzzled and frightened. One of the soldiers panics, realizing that it is Balzac, the immortal ruler of Holland, who is in question, and shouts in fear and bewilderment as to why such a powerful enemy has appeared here. Michael is stunned, unable to understand why Balzac, a majestic and powerful foe, has appeared here, and suspects it is Ashalot's intrigue. One of the soldiers accuses Ashalot of causing everyone to die, shouting with rage and fear, blaming him for the impending disaster. Ashalot calmly explains that an automatic spell has been triggered that activates at any threat to his life, thus preventing an attack on him and Elizabeth. Mikhail admits that he understands the situation and asks when exactly Balzac's forces will show up here, to which Ashalot replies that it will be in 5 minutes. Mikhail realizes that he has no choice but to act immediately, despite the unconscionability of the situation, and is going to take the necessary steps to confront Balzac. With a pleading look in his eyes, Mikhail turns to Ashaloth, realizing the hopelessness of his situation, and asks him to defeat the centaur Balzac, knowing that only he is capable of doing so. The Imperial Army of Alpenia thanks him for his gesture of kindness and promises to fulfill any petition in exchange for his help. It is a moment of complete sincerity and seriousness. The black-haired man asks with interest if any wish will indeed be granted. He is answered in the affirmative, assuring him that if he can help, his every wish will be granted. A golden-haired girl, Elizabeth, suddenly asks if anyone present knows how to look after children. This causes surprise and bewilderment among all those gathered. Michael, a brown-haired mage, confidently states that he is perfectly capable of doing so, adding that caring for girls is his calling. His words are filled with determination and passion. Elizabeth informs the black-haired man, Ashalot, that this man will be looking after her for a week. She gives him the opportunity to object if he objects. Ashaloth agrees, confirming that fighting the dead is very different from fighting the living. He explains that they will not stop until their life vessel is destroyed. Elizabeth realizes that if Ashalot does not join the battle, Michael may die. This makes her anxious and worried for the lives of her friends. Michael, sensing her gaze, tries to understand why she is looking at him that way. He wonders if he is so unreliable in her eyes. Elizabeth decides that she agrees to the proposed plan, adding that she has vassal. She is confident she can handle the situation. Ashalot, with a serious expression on his face, promises not to worry and to protect her at the cost of his life. His determination conveys confidence and calmness to those around him. Centaur Balzac holds a glowing skull in his hands that emits a powerful energy. He utters something majestic, conveying the power of the skull. The crew of the ship watches in horror at what is happening. They are terrified that they will not be able to survive. One of the sailors panics, worried about his fiancée left at home. Elizabeth, observing all that is happening, suggests that they refuse to go any further. She is worried and confused in the face of impending danger. Ashalot is surprised to learn that even Elizabeth is having doubts. He thinks deeply, assessing the situation and the possible consequences. Observing Michael's actions, Ashalot offers a simple nod in response, believing that their fate is already predetermined and it doesn't matter. Ashalot turns to Elizabeth, asking if anything would change if they took different actions. His face expresses deep thought and doubt. The ship's crew is stunned by the discovery of the possibility of spatial manipulation. They steer the ship in an unknown direction, hoping to find a way out. Ashalot, despite his doubts, resolutely asks Elizabeth to wait for him. He is confident in his abilities and is willing to fight the unknown for her safety. Elizabeth, with worry in her eyes, asks Ashalot to return safe and sound. She worries for him and hopes that everything will end safely. Michael is relieved to notice that they have managed to break away from their pursuers. He sinks to the floor tiredly, trying to catch his breath after a tense moment. Suddenly they see a multitude of bats with burning eyes in the sky. Mikhail wonders in horror who they are, not expecting to see something like that. Michael realizes that they are surrounded by evil spirits. He is amazed that even after jumping several hundred kilometers, they are still haunted by these beings. Mikhail decides that it is time for them to flee, and with a shout he informs them that he has had enough of this. He urges everyone to leave the place immediately to save themselves. Elizabeth is amazed that evil spirits have found them even here. She ponders that perhaps they thought they were safe, leaving Ashalot to fight the main enemy. Michael insists that Elizabeth must flee. He orders her to get on a lifeboat and get as far away from here as possible to escape the evil spirits. Mikhail orders his associate Carmen to take Elizabeth and put her on the lifeboat. He is convinced that this is the only way to protect her. Carmen, realizing the gravity of the situation, runs to Elizabeth and calls her after him. He doesn't give her time to think, rushing to get away from his pursuit. Elizabeth resists, stating that she can't just run away. She needs to stay to help her friends fight their enemies. She is certain that she has seen the true names of the evil spirits with her own eyes. This discovery could help in their fight, and she feels the need to stay and share this information. Elizabeth embraces Michael and is tormented by doubts about her worth. She is questioned about the meaning of her being here, emphasizing her uselessness, which causes her pain and despair. Memories come to mind. In order to save the crew, her father decided to stay on board until the last man and defend the ship. These thoughts fill her with determination and a desire to act like her father. The man accompanying her notices how much Elizabeth resembles her father. This similarity makes her feel proud and responsible for her future actions. General Yul Pondius asks Elizabeth not to shed tears for him. He thanks her for her loyalty and confesses that it was an honor to fight beside her, shoulder to shoulder. Michael expresses his gratitude to Elizabeth for her contributions, calling her a great summoner. His words emphasize her importance and significance in their common struggle. Elizabeth and Michael discuss the situation, and she urges him to return to the wheelhouse. Her words are full of desperation and determination. There is almost no time left. This is the only way, in Elizabeth's opinion, that they can save Kylie's father. She begs him to believe her just this once, her eyes full of tears and hope that he will follow her plea to save his loved ones. Michael asks Elizabeth how she knows the name of the general's daughter. His question expresses surprise and alarm, for her knowledge seems unfathomable to him. Elizabeth replies confidently that her father told her about it. This knowledge helps her make important decisions, convincing her that together they can change the course of events. Elizabeth gathers all her will in her fist and calls her friends to action. Her determination inspires them, and together they are ready to go all the way to save their loved ones and accomplish the mission. Elizabeth argues with a man that they are going the wrong way. She insists that she can help, but the man objects that she and the general are military and cannot accept help from civilians. Elizabeth is frustrated, feeling that her efforts are in vain. She had hoped that she could be helpful but faces rejection, which undermines her confidence and makes her doubt her role. Vasil appears and asks Elizabeth the important question of whether she is really capable of helping. His voice gives her hope and makes her think about her own strength and capabilities. Vasil gently asks Elizabeth to simply nod if she is willing to help. Elizabeth, a little surprised, agrees, confident that her powers can do some good. This gives her confidence. Assured of her willingness, Vasil cheerfully confirms that all will be well. He carefully coaxes Elizabeth, filling her with a sense of support and hope for success in the task ahead. Calming Elizabeth down, Vasil asks her not to worry about the man. He gently brings her to talk about the plan, knowing that everyone on board could die if they don't act quickly and decisively. Vasil emphasizes the rarity and value of Elizabeth's talent for magic. He explains that hundreds of thousands of people are born every day, but children with such unique abilities are extremely rare. He continues by stating that Elizabeth is far more valuable to him than ordinary wizards. Therefore, he will not allow her to get involved in dangerous situations, as her safety comes first for him. Elizabeth is surprised by Vasil's words. He explains that despite the insanity of her idea, even the slightest chance of success changes everything. Elizabeth begins to realize the importance of her contribution and prepares to act. Elizabeth tells Vasil her plan, hoping to use her unique abilities to save everyone on board. Vasil listens intently and prepares to act together. Vasil informs Elizabeth that she only has 2 rings of mana left. Elizabeth looks worried, as this could mean serious limitations in her magical abilities. Vasil explains that her Eye of Truth is still functioning, but in her current state, she will only be able to see a couple evil spirits at most. He confirms that she doesn't stand a chance against the contract. Vasil mockingly assures him that he can see right through Elizabeth. He emphasizes her vulnerability and lack of mana, reinforcing her lack of confidence in her own abilities. Vasil explains that the evil spirits are already bound to our world because of the contract with Balzac. This means they don't need to go through all 3 stages to possess them. He reminds them that the plan will only work if a strong wizard is involved, and Elizabeth only has 2 rings of mana left. She realizes her powers are limited and needs help. Vasil questions Elizabeth's confidence in her ability to intercept the contracts of all spirits in her current state. She tries to assure him of her powers, but he does not believe she will succeed. Elizabeth declares emphatically that she knows where to get more mana. Her confidence causes Vasil to be surprised, but she doesn't back down. She points to a magical crystal on the bow of the ship, explaining that that is where her mana reserves can be replenished. This crystal could be their salvation. Vasil is adamant that the plan won't work, as harnessing the power of the crystal will cause the ship to go down and kill everyone on board. The argument between them intensifies. Vasil suddenly realizes that they can use the bats to escape. He offers to use their ability to fly to realize his plan, exclaiming with delight and hope. Vasil tells Elizabeth that she is right, with a smile on his face and placing his hand on her head, expressing friendliness and support. Vasil tells Elizabeth that she will need to get to the Sturm on her own and asks if she can manage, to which she confidently answers in the affirmative. Vasil tells Elizabeth to run, whereupon she quickly flees, complying with his instructions. Michael is confronted by hordes of bats and exclaims that there is no end to them, showing his struggle and determination. A skull with fiery eyes appears in front of Michael, asking if he admits defeat, emphasizing the threat he faces. The skull says he will give him the opportunity to experience the flames of Toronto, heightening the tension and danger. Mikhail responds sarcastically to the skull, preferring to hear that he will be kept alive, expressing his disdain for the threat. Mikhail grips his weapon tightly, thinking that he must hold out until Elizabeth is safe, showing his determination to protect her. Mikhail resolutely tells himself to destroy as many monsters as possible, showing his determination and willingness to fight to the end. Mikhail was surprised when Elizabeth suddenly hugged him, exclaiming joyfully that he was alive. He couldn't understand what she was doing here. Vasil, looking down on him, said with a sneer that an ordinary mage had graced him with her touch, and offered to consider it an honor. Michael looked around and realized that the mage with the eye of truth was standing before him, which filled him with fear and wonder. He objected that it was only a legend, to which Vasil suggested that the argument be postponed to a more appropriate time. Vasil confidently stated that the scarecrow would come to his senses soon, when an eerie grimace appeared on his face. A mechanical voice announced that an anomaly had been detected, the cause of which was unknown. The voice went on to say that an unknown human had been discovered, and this greatly alarmed Elizabeth. Michael, looking at Elizabeth worriedly, asked if she was sure of her plan. She was determined to succeed. Mikhail trusted his instinct, which had always saved him in battles, and decided that Elizabeth was right. Elizabeth hugged Michael tightly, and he gathered his courage and told her to hold on tight, preparing for the battle ahead. The real fight was just beginning, and each of them was ready for what the future held in store for them. In a dark arena filled with magic, a skull of blue flame distorted space, warning of the unpredictability of human actions. Ashot, protecting Elizabeth, faces a powerful enemy demanding they stop. Mikhail creates a protective barrier, delaying the enemies, but warns Elizabeth that she can hold them off for no more than 10 minutes. In that time, she must intercept an important contract to complete their mission. Vasil shows up, ready to help. He jokingly offers to improve Elizabeth's brain, which causes her embarrassment. However, they quickly switch to serious business, realizing the importance of the current situation. Vasil warns Elizabeth that by binding her to the magic crystal, she will begin to lose her life force. She decisively agrees, realizing the risks, and they begin the ritual. Elizabeth and Vasil join hands, transferring the mana from the magic crystal into her body. He temporarily alters her physique so that she can absorb mana faster and get through the task. Vasil reminds her that with her current level of vitality, she will only get one chance. He emphasizes that she needs to be as careful and precise in her actions as possible. Elizabeth and Vasil are engulfed in light and magic as the ritual is completed. She feels a surge of immense amounts of mana, but realizes that it is only temporary. Vasil continues to support her, helping to keep her strength in check. Elizabeth concentrates to release the excess mana stored in her body. She feels her strength at its limit, but the determination and support of her friends give her confidence and energy. Vasil is amazed by her determination and bravery. Despite the dangers, Elizabeth is willing to take risks for the success of their mission, and this earns the respect of her allies. Elizabeth successfully releases her excess mana by completing the ritual. She is tired, but satisfied. Their combined efforts are yielding results, and the mission continues. They know there are more challenges ahead, but they are ready for them. Elizabeth, with golden eyes and flames all around her, demands that the protective barrier be removed. She is determined and furious, ready for battle. The demon, with burning red eyes and a somber purple background, sees Elizabeth as a threat. He orders her to be stopped at all costs. Elizabeth is sure the demon will lose control of the spirits again. She knows that the real Elizabeth Lilly has handled such challenges many times. The demon screams that Elizabeth's actions are unforgivable. His evil skull represents darkness and menace. The demon authorizes the destruction of Elizabeth. Its eyes burn with a bright red light, and an ominous energy hovers around it. Michael admits with a strained expression that he can no longer contain his enemies. He shouts to Elizabeth about his inability to hold back the defenses. The demon orders the destruction of the magic crystal. Green and purple energy surrounds his skull, adding a sense of danger. Elizabeth quickly grabs a magic item with a large mana crystal. She knows that this item can help in battle. Elizabeth holds out her hand, begging to be saved. Her eyes reflect fear and hope, for the outcome of the battle depends on this help. Elizabeth, radiant with joy, realized that her magical experiment had succeeded. She felt pride and excitement, for her efforts had finally borne fruit. Skula, her faithful assistant, requested the full name of the new contractor. Elizabeth listened to his words in surprise, trying to figure out who he meant. When Skula repeated his request, Elizabeth realized it was about herself. She gave her full name, which confirmed her new status. Skula recognized her as an official contractor, confirming that her first order had been successfully completed. Elizabeth felt mixed emotions, but was determined. Skula noted Elizabeth's weak language skills, but assured her that he could remedy the situation by beginning to customize a new way of using language tokens. Elizabeth, confused by Skula's odd tone, insisted that she was fine. She emphasized that it was his manner of speaking that was perplexing. Skula reported that he understood and complied with the first order and requested a new instruction. Elizabeth, a little confused, offered to go up first. Realizing that the magic crystal had exhausted all of its mana, Elizabeth worried that their ship would not hold in the air and would shatter. She ordered Skula to do everything possible to keep the ship from falling. Skula, analyzing the situation, offered to take Elizabeth to safety. However, Elizabeth was determined to save everyone. Even though Skula warned her about the impossibility of holding the weight of the ship, she was ready to fight to the end. Elizabeth, filled with determination, cannot accept the current situation. She knows there must be another way out and decides to act despite her fear and doubts. In a furious fight, Elizabeth uses her power against her enemy by grabbing Skula's skull. In desperation, she wonders how far she is willing to go to win. In a moment of tension, Elizabeth inspires Skula, convincing him of their ability to overcome any obstacle. However, the order seems impossible to fulfill, and hope begins to fade. Elizabeth finds a way to divide the forces by suggesting that Skula take on one half of the task while she tackles the other. She believes that together they can overcome any difficulties. Encouraged by their determination, Elizabeth and Skula rush into battle with renewed vigor. Their confidence grows, and they are convinced that they can handle any challenge. As the battle reaches its climax, Elizabeth is relieved to see Michael, who is glad that she is unharmed. They realize that together they are stronger and can overcome any obstacle. Elizabeth promises to come down to them, urging them to be ready to catch her. Their teamwork and support for each other becomes key in this dangerous situation. Michael hugs Elizabeth with excitement and relief, glad that she is okay. His support and care help her find the strength to keep fighting. Together, they realize that they can overcome any hardship. Their combined efforts and faith in each other help them come out victorious from this difficult situation despite all the obstacles. Elizabeth manages to rewrite the contract, and she proudly informs Michael about it. He is amazed by her success and asks if she was able to complete the task. The girl confidently confirms that she was up to the task. However, Elizabeth quickly turns her attention to something more important. They urgently need to get back on board the ship. Her eyes are full of determination, and she urges immediate action, for time is not on their side. Michael, realizing the importance of the moment, offers to run to the lifeboat, but then he suddenly stops, and his face becomes serious. He decides to abandon the original plan. Elizabeth realizes that the magic crystal is completely emptied and the lifeboat will not be able to take off. Her look becomes sad and she realizes the gravity of the situation. But Michael, despite the difficulties, is determined. He confidently declares that he will be able to keep the ship from falling. In his eyes, he reads the readiness to go to the end to save everyone. But then he suddenly changes his mind and asks Elizabeth to forget his words. He asks what her plan is, recognizing her leadership skills and trusting her decisions. Elizabeth explains that the first thing to do is to put the ship into emergency landing mode. This will help keep it flying all the way to the ground, even with a nearly empty magic crystal. She assures Mikhail that they can get by without mana, since she has made a contract with the demon. Her determination and belief in success fill her words with power and conviction. Michael, seeing her confidence, agrees and says he believes in her. Her unwavering faith and determination make him accept her plan and trust her completely. Panic begins to set in aboard the ship. Michael informs her that they need someone capable of steering the ship or things will go badly wrong. They must find someone who can handle the task. Suddenly, it becomes apparent that one of the girls is missing. Michael and his comrade are terrified and discuss where she could have gone. Their faces express confusion and worry. Mikhail is angry with his friend, accusing him of dragging them outside. However, the man excuses himself that his fiancée is waiting at home and he just wants to get back to her. Mikhail's friend decides that since everything is fine with the girl, it's time to leave. He suggests doing it right now without waiting for more problems. Mikhail asks his friend if he knows how to steer the ship. His tone sounds insistent and determined, clearly demanding a specific answer. But his friend panics, claiming that he is an ordinary civilian and doesn't know how to do it. He believes he has accomplished his mission and can now go wherever he wants. Michael decides to put the ship into emergency landing mode. His determination inspires confidence that they will be able to handle the situation despite all the difficulties. The situation escalates when Mikhail drags his friend back to the navigator's room. He resists and screams that he doesn't want to do this. Fear and despair are readable on his face. Elizabeth, gathering all her strength, holds the ship in the air. Michael praises her for her excellent work and promises to make the ship take off, despite all the obstacles. At this time, Sculla, perplexed, says that Elizabeth has an exceptional talent for control that surpasses his skills. He realizes that such a thing is impossible for an ordinary person. Elizabeth declares that she is special because she is Elizabeth Lilly. Michael stops the magic, which is a critical step in controlling the ship. His job is to land the ship gently on the ground, which he announces with concern in his voice. Elizabeth is relieved, realizing that she needs to hold out just a little longer. Her determination is evident on her face despite the hardship she has endured. Vassal reassures Elizabeth, assuring her that all will be well and she can let the ship go. He recognizes her significant contribution and reassures her that everyone will survive, except for the unlucky ones. He is perplexed as to why talented children are so stubborn, but realizes there is no choice and agrees to help. Vassal decides to take away her pain to ease Elizabeth's suffering at least a little. Vasil, using magic, embraces Elizabeth, taking away her pain. She thanks him. Their bond and trust is evident in this moment of closeness and support. He wonders how she was able to pull this off at such a young age. Elizabeth wistfully admits that she herself does not understand how she managed to make a contract with the demon. Elizabeth approaches Vassal with her request, experiencing inner doubts. He does not hesitate to help, showing his loyalty and willingness to support her in any situation. She confesses that she has made a contract with Sculla and asks him to keep it a secret from Ashot. Elizabeth is concerned about the possible repercussions if Ashaloth finds out. Elizabeth insists that they don't want any unnecessary trouble, asking Vasil not to tell Ashaloth. Her voice sounds pleading, and Vasil, touched by her request, ponders her words. Vassal asks in a panic what happened to Ellie. He is concerned and apparently something has gone wrong. Elizabeth is horrified and seems lost. Elizabeth sees glowing lights all around her. She is surprised to see the school and bats appear before her, not realizing what is happening. She realizes that the thread in her hand is proof of a contract with Sculla made through the true name. This realization causes her anxiety. Elizabeth finds it strange and doesn't understand how she knows all these details. She is puzzled by her new knowledge. She realizes that the contract with the previous owner of the Schuella is still up, which could be the cause of the current problems. Elizabeth ponders the fact that Scuella may not realize who his real owner is now, and decides it is best to cut the stranger's thread so there is no confusion. At that moment, she is overcome with terror when she hears the voice of Centaur Balzac, the demon who saved her once from something terrible. Elizabeth concludes that Balzac sent someone trying to influence the contract, causing him to be able to enter her mind. Vasil asks Elizabeth in shock if she is a sorceress with an eye of truth. He begins to realize that something supernatural is going on. Balzac appears before them, his intimidating appearance heightening the tension. He declares that he has come here after Elizabeth to get to the bottom of what has happened. Elizabeth, trying to resist the magic of centaurus balzac, feels the demon's icy hand enter her mind, leaving her feeling cold and afraid. She realizes that the demon wants to bend her will to its sinister plan. Elizabeth feels a chilling coldness emanating from Balzac's hand that slowly takes over her thoughts. Panic and terror overwhelm her, and she tries to resist, but the demonic force is too great. Elizabeth exclaims that the necromancer dare not invade her mind, showing her outrage and fear of his power. She desperately tries to protect her thoughts from the sinister influence. Centaur Balzac invades her thoughts again, and Elizabeth feels his powers penetrate deeper, filling her mind with darkness and chaos. She realizes that she is losing the battle for her mind. Ashot warns Elizabeth that she must not be distracted, or she may die. His words penetrate her mind, forcing her to focus and fight to the last. Elizabeth wonders how the demon was able to get into her mind. She tries to understand what is happening and realizes that her mind is on the verge of breaking down. She feels her strength leaving her. Ashot orders Balzac to stop crunching his bones, threatening to blow the hell out of everything. He shows his strength and determination, ready to protect Elizabeth at all costs. Elizabeth realizes that if Ashot blows the place up, her consciousness will be affected by the blast as well. She realizes the gravity of the situation and decides to fight to the end to survive and save her mind. A golden-haired girl named Elizabeth is confronted by a mysterious figure that suddenly appears in front of her. She tries to figure out who it is. The mysterious stranger refuses to reveal his identity, claiming that it is not yet time for them to meet. He calls Elizabeth by her first name, which leaves her perplexed. Elizabeth begins to realize that the stranger's voice seems very familiar to her, as if he has been in constant communication with her. She notices a similarity to her own voice. She realizes that the words the figure speaks are not coming from herself, but as if from inside her mind. The stranger insists that it is not yet time for the truth to be revealed. The stranger warns Elizabeth that she does not need to know more about him yet and asks her to temper her curiosity. He continues to call her by name. The mysterious figure reassures Elizabeth, telling her that there is nothing to worry about and that she has another chance. Elizabeth begins to wonder what is happening. She wonders why her body has suddenly gotten so big since she's only 10 years old. Elizabeth tries to realize the reality of what is happening. Gradually, she begins to realize that she is much more than 10 years old, over 100 years old. She is perplexed as to why she has suddenly begun to think of herself as a child. Elizabeth realizes that she is aboard a Continental Union warship. She begins to question her memories and realization of her own self. Lucifer laughs and asks defiantly if they have changed their minds. He looks confident and ready for action, foreshadowing an imminent battle. An important moment is looming. Elizabeth looks off into the distance, determined that it is too late to retreat. Her hair flutters in the wind, creating a sense of inevitability and power. She reflects on the castle of the first mage Athanasia, which is the last stronghold of humanity. She recalls her dreams of being on top of this castle. Elizabeth orders Lucifer to destroy the barrier. Lucifer agrees and rushes forward, showing his loyalty and determination. Lucifer teasingly invites Elizabeth to go along for the ride. He shows his loyalty and willingness to follow her into any danger. Elizabeth warns Enoch to be on his guard. She walks forward with her head proudly up, showing her confidence and leadership skills. Enoch declares that they will indeed go there. He stands by Elizabeth, reaffirming his intentions and willingness to fight. Elizabeth responds with a slight chuckle, asking if he really wants her to go alone. Her determination and confidence only grows stronger. Enoch, with a gentle smile, says that since she has made up her mind, he is willing to follow her. He shows his support and loyalty. Enoch, holding the rod in his hand, says that they will save him. He is determined and ready to help, concluding the series of events with a sense of unity and purpose. Enoch Silas carefully surveys his surroundings, holding a magical artifact. Determination glows in his eyes, ready to do battle with the golems that have infested the place. Elizabeth is disappointed to notice that the golems are not summoned spirits with whom she could have made a contract. Together with Enoch, they prepare to fight the enemies. Azazel urges Elizabeth forward with concern in his voice, promising to catch up with them soon. His eyes read determination and readiness for battle. Elizabeth, wasting no time, runs swiftly up the stairs, tension in her movements. She knows that every second counts. In the darkness comes the ominous voice of Ashot, rebuking Elizabeth for being late. She must face this mysterious adversary. Anastasia Axiom, a great mage and sorceress, was the first to possess the magical eye of truth. Her legendary feats inspire the current heroes to fight. Elizabeth recalls how Anastasia led humanity to victory in the Great War against demons and evil spirits 300 years ago. That feat became a symbol of hope for all. Anastasia placed a protective barrier atop the Tower of the Storm to keep the world safe from the invasion of evil spirits. Her magic still protects this world from evil. Ashalot reminds Elizabeth that not everyone liked Anastasia. Demons and evil spirits, possessed by a lust for destruction, have always sought to disturb the peace. Elizabeth, standing in the darkened hall, blames Ashalot for not keeping his promise to give her another chance. Her heart is filled with pain and determination to continue the fight. Elizabeth, standing against the cosmic sky, speaks with an angry face about how destroying the defense barrier is their cherished dream. Her resolve is unwavering, ready to fight to the end. Ashalot looks at Elizabeth with disdain and declares that he is not speaking to her. His words are full of contempt, and he has no intention of conceding this battle. Elizabeth angrily asks how long Ashalot will hide behind the dragon. She is clearly irritated by his tactics, and her anger only grows. The text explains that the dragon is a special entity that can absorb weaker fowls through touch. This gives the battle a new mystical level. Ashalot taunts Elizabeth, asking if she's serious, and calls her poor thing. His words are full of sarcasm and arrogance. Ashalot explains that entities absorbed by the dragon become one with him. This makes him even more powerful and dangerous. He also adds that the human consciousness within them cannot last forever, hinting at Elizabeth's inevitable fate. Ashalot directs Elizabeth to forget her fruitless dreams and better watch their approach to the fulfillment of her wish. His confidence and mockery leave her unmoved. Elizabeth, with her face smeared in blood, asks how much longer he plans to touch her with his filthy hands. Her disgust and hatred for Ashalot is obvious. Ashalot, with a smirk, calls her naive. His confidence and sense of superiority is evident. He clearly does not take her seriously. Elizabeth, full of hope, contrary to what her adversary says, still believes that someone important to her is alive. Her hopes and emotions are reflected on her face. Ashalot, with a wound on his face, expresses skepticism about love, calling it a foolish feeling that leads to mistakes. He looks confident and even mocking. Ashalot is shocked at what is happening, clutching his head. He can't believe what is happening is real, calling it impossible. The masked Ashalot doubts that this is really Elizabeth. Her appearance stirs up a lot of emotions in him, and he tries to realize if it is really her. Ashalot wryly remarks that she should have slapped him with her small hand. He looks vulnerable, but still maintains his defiant demeanor. Ashalot admits that the pain he is feeling is much worse than the first time. He is in a state of deep reflection and regret. Elizabeth shows her pain and resentment by stating that her hands are numb after 2 strokes. She tries to convey to Ashalot that she too is in pain. Elizabeth blames Ashalot for not giving her one last chance like he promised. Her pain and disappointment from his actions is evident in her words and actions. Elizabeth reminds Ashalot with despair of his promise to wait for her to find another way out. She feels betrayed by his false promises. Ashalot, with a serious and determined expression on his face, was used to imprison the dragon inside his body. This bought time to create a protective barrier to prevent the destruction of the world. Elizabeth, in a bright red and blue dress, questions Ashalot as to why exactly he was chosen for this role and why he must be banished from their world. Ashalot, looking away, sadly observes that none of this will ever happen to him again. He realizes that his fate is inevitable. He explains to Elizabeth that once he crosses the border of the underworld, his consciousness will be erased. He says that he will die. Elizabeth, holding Ashalot by his clothes, asks him if he is truly content with a life where he was used until death just because he is a half-demon. The process of erasing his consciousness has accelerated, and he admits that he would have lasted another year at most, but has decided to end it while he remains himself. Ashalot says fondly that his mentor agreed that it was best for him. He puts his hand to Elizabeth's face. Ashalot rebukes Elizabeth for being naive, saying that she is too naive to believe that she can save everyone. He calls her by her first name, Elizabeth Lily. Elizabeth, lowering her gaze, admits that she doesn't need to save everyone. It is enough for her to save Ashalot. She looks at him with determination in her eyes. Elizabeth looks away, saying that it was foolish to hope he would listen to her. She prepares herself for some decisive action. Ashalot cries out in panic, asking what Elizabeth is up to. He fears for her, not wanting her to do anything dangerous for him. Elizabeth stands before Enoch Silas and accuses him of doing the wrong thing, despite his status as protector of the world. She's determined to fight for her ideals. Elizabeth is outraged and says that she did not ask for help. Her anger and determination show that she is willing to fight on her own without accepting the interference of others. Elizabeth recalls her past and says that she has always wanted only one thing. Her face reflects deep sadness and inner struggle. She longed to become stronger in order to escape her tormentors and gain freedom. Her desire to be free was the main motive behind all her actions. Elizabeth realizes that her sins were the cause of her suffering. She took them on her soul to go through all the trials and reach her goal. She wants to atone for her sins and gain freedom so that she can have a future relationship that didn't work out from the beginning. This is her deep desire for personal rebirth. Elizabeth realizes that she ended up getting exactly what she wanted. She is ready to save those she cares about despite all the difficulties and obstacles. Enoch Silas does not understand her motivation and doubts the reasoning behind her actions. He believes that history will repeat itself and wonders what the point of her efforts are. Elizabeth replies that even if history repeats itself, she will remember all her lessons. Her confidence in her own abilities is beyond doubt. Ashalot warns her that preserving her memories will be a challenge, but Elizabeth is confident in her abilities and is willing to take on the task. Ashalot Vane joyfully greeted Enoch Silas after a long separation. He looked content and friendly, a smile lighting up his face as he spoke of past events. Ashaloth shared his latest adventures, recounting the recent battle with the golems. He genuinely wondered why Enoch had decided to participate in this crazy mission, asking him with curiosity. Enoch reminded Ashaloth of his special ability, showing that he could not only fight, but also share his wisdom. He emphasized that their skills could be useful in times of need. Ashaloth tried to convince Enoch that if he used his ability now, he would not be able to pass on his wisdom to future generations. He pondered this with deep respect for Enoch's legacy. Enoch had stated with certainty that the heir should become a worthy ruler through his own efforts, not at the expense of another's ability. He smiled, showing his determination and faith in future generations. When Elizabeth begins to rewrite history, the past and the future will intersect for a moment. It would be a moment of truth when they could change the course of events and create a new reality. Enoch was confident that he would be able to pass on his memories to Elizabeth. He knew that he would only have a second to accomplish what he had planned, but he had prepared himself and was confident of success. Enoch made every effort to ensure that not a single memory would be lost. He turned his thoughts and experiences into text, condensing them down to their most important moments to pass on to Elizabeth. Elizabeth accepted the book that now contained the entirety of Enoch's memory. This book was a symbol of their shared struggles and hopes for a brighter future. Enoch explained that he had already shown the book to Elizabeth. The book was called The Walfer Story, and it was filled with wisdom and experience that would help them in the trials to come. Ashalot, looking at his opponent with disdain, realizes that he has gone mad. He sees his actions as signs of utter madness and calls him a scoundrel. His mind is enveloped by the darkness of space, illuminated by bright stars. Enoch Silas, with a glowing smile and a blush on his cheeks, confesses his feelings. He realizes that all of his actions were caused by one reason. He fell in love. The pink flowers around him symbolize the blossoming of his feelings. Ashalot and Elizabeth Lilly collide in a magic circle glittering with golden symbols. Ashalot doubts her success and questions how she is going to stop the high demon from betraying them, even if she turns back time. Elizabeth, despite her doubts, is determined. She knows she might fail, but she decides to try anyway. Her eyes burn with the fire of self-belief and determination to change fate. Elizabeth declares that she is Elizabeth Lilly, and for the sake of her goal, she is ready to go to the end, even if it will not bring her any reward. Her words are full of confidence and willingness to sacrifice herself for the greater good. Ashalot, shocked and agitated, screams to stop her. But Elizabeth has already made her decision. She knows that their special relationship will not change her ways, and she is willing to go all the way, even if it destroys their bond. Elizabeth, seeing the sudden appearance of the dragon, asks in bewilderment how this is possible. Her eyes are wide with wonder and fear of the new and unknown that threatens her mission. The dark dragon who had become possessed by Ashaloth sensed her despair. His red words blaze like fire in the darkness, conveying the power and anger with which he is filled. Elizabeth senses the growing danger. The dragon has heard Elizabeth's true hopes and desires. His power responds to her emotions, leading to a dramatic clash. The red crystals and dark scales symbolize the destruction and power ready to tear their world apart. Elizabeth Lilly is confronted by a powerful demon who offers her a contract, promising to fulfill her wishes. This offer is framed in bright colors and somber shadows, underscoring the significance and danger of the moment. But Elizabeth did not fall for the demon's tricks. She refused, declaring that she would not be deceived by his words. With determination and strength in her voice, she confronted the dark entity, garnering respect for her courage. After this event, Elizabeth awakens in her bed, feeling that she has had a strange dream about Ashalot. She cannot remember the details, but it leaves her with a sense of unease and curiosity. Elizabeth tries to reconstruct the events before she fell asleep, but everything seems blurry. Images get jumbled, and she gets lost in trying to piece together fragments of memories. She looks around and realizes she's in an unfamiliar place. This causes her even more questions and anxiety. Elizabeth tries to figure out where she is and how she got here. Suddenly, a strange creature approaches her, asking if her awakening was successful. Elizabeth is surprised by his manner of speech and begins to realize that this place is not ordinary at all. The creature, who turns out to be the demon Skula, who has taken the form of a cat, declares that there has been no deviation in essence. Elizabeth is surprised and tries to conceptualize how the demon could have turned into a cat. Skula explains that body grabbing is one of his skills, and the disguise is necessary to hide his true essence. This discovery raises many new questions and suspicions for Elizabeth. Elizabeth recalls that the past contractor favored the skull shape, but with the new contractor's arrival, an update to the disguise was required. Despite everything, she begins to like the cat much better. Suzanne, catching Elizabeth awake, greets her and inquires about her well-being. The girl looked slightly confused, which was understandable. She woke up in an unfamiliar place. Suzanne asks with a smile if Elizabeth slept well, adding a note of warmth and concern to the conversation. Elizabeth, still under the covers, slowly realizes she's in a place she is unfamiliar with. Suzanne notices her confusion and clarifies that the girl may indeed have been surprised to wake up in a new environment. Her soothing tone helps Elizabeth relax a little and feel safe. Suzanne carefully inquires if Elizabeth is in pain, expressing genuine concern. Elizabeth, still under the impression of what is happening, begins to look around and gradually realizes that the person in front of her is not a danger, but a friendly person. When Susanna asks Elizabeth if she knows where she is, the girl only looks at her confused. Susanna explains that they are in the city of magicians, and Elizabeth begins to slowly recall what she has heard about the place where she is to be tried. Elizabeth suddenly asks why Susanna is not aware of this, thinking that the demon summoned Ashalot might have been in front of her. You can see the bewilderment and confusion in her eyes. She tries to understand what is going on and why information about her trial is unknown to the others. Elizabeth remembers Vassal and asks Susanna about him and Ashaloth, who she was told should return in a week. Susanna, noticing the worry in Elizabeth's eyes, gently explains that she has nothing to worry about, trying to reassure the girl. Suzanne suggests that Elizabeth relax and calls her by name, trying to create an atmosphere of trust. Elizabeth, still wary, slowly begins to feel a little more confident. Suzanne assures her that she can address her by her first name. Suzanne introduces herself as Suzanne O'Brien, suggesting Elizabeth call her simply by her first name. Elizabeth looks at her curiously, trying to figure out who is in front of her. Suzanne smiles, trying to create an atmosphere of friendliness and safety. Elizabeth learns that she is at the home of Suzanne's father, Ethan, who works as the vice president of the association. This information seems familiar to the girl, and she begins to remember that she heard about it from Ashalot. Gradually, her puzzle begins to come together. Elizabeth remembers that Vassal holds the position of president in this association. She thinks about what Ashalot told her about Suzanne's father. Scraps of information begin to form in her mind, helping her to better understand where she is and what is going on. In a cozy room with soft light, Susanna asks Elizabeth about the problem, but she remains silent, waiting for an explanation. The atmosphere tenses as if anticipating an important revelation, and Susanna promises that everything will become clearer a little later. Elizabeth, covered with a blanket and cuddling her cat Skula, ponders why she was given to an acquaintance. The thought of being stolen for some ancient skull makes her anxious and fearful of the unknown. Susanna, feeling guilty, apologizes to Elizabeth for her ignorance of magical matters. She explains that she is not a magician herself and therefore cannot provide more detailed information about what has happened. Susanna gently strokes Elizabeth's head, trying to comfort her. She admits that she has been worried about her all week while she was unconscious. Elizabeth realizes that she has slept for a whole week and is surprised by this fact. Elizabeth reflects on her magical ability, realizing that the spell was more complicated than she thought. Her eyes express deep doubt in her powers, and she begins to realize her limits. The girl asks about the fate of the other people who were with her on the Imperial flying ship. Susanna confirms that everyone has been rescued, and this brings Elizabeth some relief, for she had been worried for their safety. Elizabeth is relieved to realize that she was not wrong in her actions and that everyone was saved because of her. She is proud of her efforts despite all the doubts and difficulties she faced. Skula, sitting next to Elizabeth, suddenly demands a truthful description from the old man. His voice sounds stern and insistent, as if he is trying to make sense of the situation and find the truth. Susanna is shocked that Skula can talk. Elizabeth, on the other hand, seems concerned that the cat might crush her if she isn't careful. This scene adds a bit of comic timing to a tense situation. Multiple people near Elizabeth have been seriously injured. A menacing demon cat warns of grave danger, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Elizabeth is horrified at what she hears, her eyes widening with fear. The demon explains that the people have been attacked by an evil wizard, seriously injuring them. Tension builds. A demon in a black robe with a crown and glowing eyes confirms that the evil wizard known as Balzac has finally gotten to the innocent people, compounding the danger. The cat demon clarifies that the previous contractor did not harm the current one, but instead called him a good wizard. This causes Elizabeth confusion and doubt. Elizabeth is shocked to learn that many people have referred to the wizard as Ashot Vane. This name causes her to have mixed feelings, memories resurface. Elizabeth can't believe what she hears and thinks that perhaps the demon was mistaken. Her face expresses disbelief and anxiety, creating a tense atmosphere. The demon demands an apology, claiming that he has no problem with his eyesight. Elizabeth, sitting on the bed, feels uncomfortable and apologizes for her words. Elizabeth is certain that Ashalot could not have done such a thing. Her face expresses determination and confidence in this, creating a contrast to the previous scene. Susanna, smiling, offers Elizabeth a refresher, as they will still have time to chat. The scene changes to a calmer and more domestic atmosphere. Susanna reassures Elizabeth, saying that guests don't need to apologize so often. The bedroom scene becomes cozy and reassuring, ending the episode with a sense of care and peace. Elizabeth, a girl with golden hair, whispers to Susanna that one of the maids is half demon. This leaves Susanna shocked and bewildered. She asks how Elizabeth could know this, since she herself had only guessed at the presence of demons among the maids. Susanna confirms that she had guessed about demons among the servants, but did not know who they were. Elizabeth surprises her with her keen eyes, able to recognize demons at a glance. Many questions arise in Suzanne's mind about what is going on in the mansion. Ethan, a man with gray hair, greets Elizabeth, revealing his identity as the mansion's owner and summoner. He clearly wields considerable magical powers, which adds to the tension surrounding the mysterious setting of the house. Elizabeth worries about Ashalot's condition, asking Ethan about his health. She also inquires about the outcome of the battle with the centaur Balzac, which adds drama to their conversation. These events create an atmosphere of danger and anxiety. Ethan assures Elizabeth that Ashalot is fine, but is informed of Balzac's death. His workshop now lies in ruins. This tragic event adds gloom and depth to the plot, emphasizing the dangers they face. Ethan confesses that he has not told Elizabeth everything. His confusion and secrecy suggest that there are even darker and more terrible secrets lurking in the mansion. Elizabeth senses that something important is being left behind. After 3 days since the shipwreck, soldiers from the Japanese army arrive on the scene. They have no interest in the survivors. Their goal is the experimental weapons aboard the ship. This moment emphasizes the cruelty and indifference of the military, putting their goals above human lives. Elizabeth, who was injured saving the ship, is not even paid attention to by the soldiers. She ends up in the arms of a mysterious red-haired man, which adds to the tragedy and emphasizes her sacrifices to save others. The return of Ashalot Vane comes as an unexpected twist. Elizabeth, exhausted and scarred, finds support in him. This moment demonstrates the strength of their bond and their willingness to fight for life despite the hardships and dangers surrounding them. The Dark Mage finalized his dealings with Balzac much sooner than he had planned. Upon seeing Elizabeth unconscious, he flew into a rage and began attacking all the soldiers indiscriminately, spreading chaos and destruction around him. The mage continued his merciless campaign, destroying everything in his path. The soldiers tried to resist, but their efforts were futile against his might, creating explosions and destruction everywhere. Vassal's intervention prevented the complete destruction of the army. Although a bloodbath was avoided due to his actions, most of the soldiers were still seriously wounded or killed. After the battle, Vassal approached Elizabeth, expressing regret for the unexpected news. He informed her that Ashalot would be facing a judicial duel in 12 hours and asked her to attend as a witness. Vasile explained that dueling was an ancient tradition among mages used to settle disputes. He emphasized that it is an important part of their culture and avoids destruction and chaos. He explained that in the case of a common man's crime, his people are punished, but magicians are more difficult to judge as they have immense power, which requires a special approach to punishment. The situation becomes even more complicated when a first-class magician who is not affiliated with any of the nations is tried. Even if a mage falls under the jurisdiction of a nation, it is difficult to judge him because of his power. Therefore, it was decided that disputes between wizards should be decided by the wizards themselves. When words fail, brute force comes into play, and thus a judicial duel is born. Elizabeth, despite her shock, understood the necessity of the judicial duel. She realized that it was an important part of their world, a way of resolving conflicts and maintaining order and justice among the mages. With the understanding of the importance of the judicial duel, Elizabeth prepared herself to participate in the event. The duel had become an inevitable part of their lives, a way of resolving conflicts and maintaining peace among the mages. Elizabeth, surprised and worried, wonders how duels between mages are conducted. She looks worried and puzzled on her throne, which emphasizes her emotional state and inexperience with magical matters. Ethan explains that mage duels don't have strict rules. Mages fight one-on-one in front of an audience. Elizabeth only needs to be present and observe what is happening. This information seems ridiculous and unimaginable to her. Elizabeth is perplexed as to why Ashalot, another mage, needs to fight. Ethan explains that it's all about a legal dispute that relates directly to Elizabeth. She expresses her incomprehension and confusion. Ethan reminds her that Ashaloth destroyed Centaur Balzac in his workshop, resulting in the Holland government demanding that Elizabeth be turned over to them as compensation. She is shocked by this statement. Elizabeth is at a loss as to why they want her. She begins to realize that the reason lies in her talent, which was demonstrated in the kidnapping of the demon Balzac. Ethan confirms that her abilities have not gone unnoticed. Elizabeth, surprised and angered, wonders why decisions are being made for her and expresses her reluctance to be involved in the situation. She clearly feels lost and powerless in the face of the circumstances. Ethan explains that the mages want to get Elizabeth precisely because of her unique abilities, which she has proven. Her talents are so great that even a blind man would notice them. Elizabeth begins to realize the importance of her skills. Elizabeth, still stunned, doesn't understand why exactly she has become the center of attention. She finds it hard to believe what is happening and expresses her doubts and worries. Her face reflects many emotions, including fear and bewilderment. Elizabeth questions the reason for this interest in her and why she should be drawn into the conflicts of the mages. She feels unfairly drawn into the struggle for power and resources, which increases her internal conflict. Ethan concludes that the mages are out to get Elizabeth because of her proven giftedness. He emphasizes that such abilities attract attention and create a desire for control. Elizabeth begins to realize that her uniqueness and talent has caused all of these events. Elizabeth, referred to as Miss Lily, is accused of violating the terms of the Grand Pact. Ethan, the vice president of the Magicians Association, informs her that she is under investigation and is being treated as a criminal. In addition, Ethan explains that the other side of the conflict is using the death of the centaur Balzac as a legal justification for their claims. Elizabeth is desperate. Aren't criminals given the right to choose where to serve their sentences? Ethan sternly reminds her that wizards are required to live by the laws of wizards. This message greatly disturbs Elizabeth, and she becomes nervous, clenching her fists in protest. Elizabeth learns that Ashalot is dueling to defend her honor. This news causes her a storm of emotion and anxiety for his fate. Ethan praises Elizabeth for her wits and asks if she would be willing to attend the court duel as a witness. He explains that her participation could help Ashalot and their union. Elizabeth, thinking of helping Ashalot, agrees to be a witness. Her agreement brings her a sense of relief and responsibility for what is happening. Susanna, supporting Elizabeth, decides to help her prepare for the duel. They discuss the need to dress according to etiquette in order to attend the trial. Elizabeth recalls that the heroine from her book always wore beautiful dresses to go out. She realizes that there is not just a trial to be held, but an important event that requires appropriate attire. She realizes the seriousness of the upcoming trial and together with Susanna prepares for the duel, taking in the importance of etiquette and appearance. Elizabeth prepares for the trial duel, hoping for a successful outcome and wanting to help Ashalot by showing her support and determination. Elizabeth looks at the many outfits suggested by Susanna with amazement. Suzanne tells how they stocked up on clothes for her daughter. Elizabeth learns that Susanna had a daughter. Suzanne sadly reminisces about her daughter and says that she did. Elizabeth embarrassedly apologizes, but Susanna comforts her by telling her that it's been a long time. Suzanne, laughing, admits that she's been a long time, over 100 years. Elizabeth is shocked to hear this, but Suzanne claims it's true and offers to try on outfits. Susanna happily offers to let Elizabeth try on the dress of her choice. She is radiant with happiness, and her enthusiasm is transferred to Elizabeth, who eagerly agrees. Ethan, the vice president of the Magicians Association, appears and asks if Miss Lily, Elizabeth, is ready to leave. Elizabeth looks forward to continuing her journey. Suzanne finalizes Elizabeth's preparations, but Ethan grumbles that she's not ready in time. Elizabeth thanks Suzanne for her help, and Suzanne replies that she had fun herself. Elizabeth and Suzanne exchange thanks in warm words. Suzanne says she enjoyed her time with Elizabeth, and they both smile. Ethan suggests that Elizabeth take a look outside on the way out. He notes that the journey to the court arena will be long and tedious, but tries to cheer her up. Ethan and Elizabeth have a leisurely conversation in the carriage. Ethan says he won't worry until they arrive. Elizabeth notes that Ethan is not like other mages with the eye of truth. Elizabeth notices that Ethan looks tired and suggests that he rest. He thanks her for her concern, but says he prefers to look at the path ahead. Elizabeth learns that the mages with the eye of truth had an unquenchable curiosity about the demonic essence, studying it with extreme scrutiny to understand its nature. Ethan asks what the other mages with this gift do. Elizabeth sadly replies that they are gone, and only she and the head of the Axiom School, Athanasia, remain. Ethan clarifies that there is only one person left besides him. Elizabeth pensively agrees as they drive up to their destination, preparing for the big event. Before them is a view of the trial arena, a majestic structure where a daunting ordeal awaits them. Elizabeth is overcome with a sense of anxiety and anticipation. Ethan apologizes to Elizabeth for having to walk. Elizabeth reassures him, telling him that it's no reason to apologize, and they begin the journey. Ethan admits that if they had made it on time, they wouldn't have had to walk. He explains that they were supposed to arrive before the security barrier was erected, but they were late because of his negligence of time. Elizabeth admits that it took her a long time to get ready, but Ethan assures her that time wasted doesn't count, and he'll repay her for it one day. Ethan says with a smile that he's used to paying back debts with a bang, so Elizabeth can say she's lucky. He gives her confidence for the challenge ahead. The crowd chants bets, 100 Dan on Ashalot Vane and 500 Dan on George Lucan. Elizabeth watches the excitement of the people in amazement. Ethan explains that gambling is allowed in Aragalda, so people are betting on the participants in the upcoming trial. Elizabeth prepares for the main event. Elizabeth, upon seeing the bets, was shocked. She could not believe that there were such people who would risk for such gambling, considering it immoral. Elizabeth reflects on Ashalot risking his life to save her from Holdland. She realizes how important this is to her, and his sacrifice makes her feel grateful. Elizabeth, along with Ethan, walks through the grand doors. She decides to remember to thank Ashalot for his help when they meet again. Ethan is excited to witness this important moment. Elizabeth confidently declares that she will definitely help Ashalot and the unification. Her determination and willpower are noticeable, and it gives her confidence. Ethan, with a kind smile, expresses his joy at Elizabeth's words. He is glad to hear her determination and willingness to help. It inspires him to continue to do so. Vasile, upon meeting Elizabeth, joyfully embraces her. She is also very happy to see her friend, whom she has not seen in a long time, and they exchange warm emotions. Elizabeth is surprised to learn that Vasile is no longer a ghost. She looks at him with bewilderment and joy, realizing that he is once again a living person. Vasile lifts Elizabeth into the air, delighted at her return. Elizabeth is a little dizzy, but happy to be around such a kind friend. Ethan thanks the vice president for bringing Elizabeth. The vice president replies that this is Miss Elizabeth Lilly. Their meeting symbolizes the beginning of a new phase in Elizabeth's life. Hestia, a white-haired woman, greets Elizabeth. She respectfully introduces herself to the young sorceress with the eye of truth, recognizing her importance and potential for unification. Elizabeth looks at the white-haired man who claims to not be a mere human. He explains that only an enchantress with the eye of truth can see his true nature, unlike an ordinary child. Elizabeth, looking at the man, ponders whether she will cry at once or hide behind Ethan. She admires his appearance and mystery, which catches her attention and arouses her curiosity. Elizabeth introduces herself, saying her name is Elizabeth Lilly, and asks the man if the pattern on his body is magical. She whispers, feeling the tension of the moment and trying to figure out what makes it so special. Looking closely at the man, Elizabeth notices something demonic in his eyes. She is sure there is something of the demon in him that both frightens and mesmerizes her, making her heart beat faster. The man smiles and says that he likes Elizabeth and that she has passed the test. His words reassure her, instilling confidence and letting her know that he considers her worthy of further companionship. The judge announces that since the last witness is in place, they can begin the hearing. He asks everyone but the witnesses to leave the room, creating an atmosphere of seriousness and importance of the upcoming event. Vasile tells Elizabeth that she and Ethan were not taken as witnesses, so they will have to leave. He suggests that she run to the special audience box after the hearing is over, arranging a meeting place with her. Elizabeth warns Vasile not to behave like this in front of the people from Albana, lest they think the judge has been bought. Vasile claims that Ellie said she would join the association and that she's already technically one of them. A mysterious figure with black hair appears in the room, asking them to stop arguing and stating that it's time for them to go. Her calm and confident tone causes everyone to stop talking and turn their attention to her. Vasile looks at Elizabeth with concern and asks if Ethan is angry. Her confusion and concern is evident on her face as she tries to understand exactly what has happened and how it might affect their plans. George, with a concerned face, asks Milla to take care of Lily and stay vigilant. He prepares for the important event, feeling the gravity of the upcoming battle. At the trial, it is revealed that Georg is the main opponent. His determination and focus show that he is preparing for a serious fight. The trial begins. The judge asks everyone to take their seats. The atmosphere in the hall becomes tense and anticipation grows. Georg greets Hestia using a derogatory nickname. This adds to the intrigue and emphasizes the tension between them. The judge directs the duelists to return to the waiting room. Hestia and Elizabeth look at Georg anxiously, waiting for developments. Hestia shouts to Elizabeth to keep behind her. Her determination and willingness to protect Elizabeth adds to the drama of the situation. Georg mockingly asks Elizabeth if she is being fed at all. He shows his contempt and tries to undermine the girl's confidence. Hestia angrily demands that Georg put Elizabeth on the ground. Her rage and determination to protect the girl creates a tense atmosphere. Georg tauntingly threatens Elizabeth, warning Hestia to be quiet so as not to frighten him. This heightens the conflict and adds to the drama. Hestia threatens to cut off Georg's arm and head if he does not stop. Her rage and determination to protect Elizabeth peaks. showing her willingness to take decisive action. An older man with gray hair, obviously the leader, orders her to stop using magic. One can hear the authority and insistence in his voice as he addresses the two characters. Georg, a man with brown hair, holds Elizabeth's hand and lifts her into the air. He taunts her, finding her magical abilities amusing while Elizabeth looks frightened. Elizabeth, despite her fear, shows her bravery. She recalls that her encounter with another dangerous opponent, Skooma, was even scarier. Ashalot, a man with black hair, and Hestia, a woman with white hair, are nearby. They discuss possible actions. Hestia suggests taking the girl away from the danger. Ashaloth remarks that using magic to bully the little ones is a disgrace. He questions his opponent's pride and his title as a wizard. Georg, smiling smugly, asks what Ashalot will do if he, a wizard without pride, continues. His sarcastic tone implies challenge and provocation. Ashalot threatens to chop off Georg's other hand if he doesn't stop. He also offers to apologize and have a fair duel with limited ability. Ashalot holds Elizabeth in his arms and ponders why exactly Georg volunteered to be a substitute. He believes that Georg is indifferent to politics and is only interested in fun. Ashalot contemplates killing Georg right now, but realizes that doing so would cause unnecessary trouble. He fears the consequences and doesn't want to be in debt to another mage, Ethan Morse. Ashalot realizes that the girl could be in trouble. He realizes that he can no longer tolerate these villains and decides it would be best to win the duel to protect Elizabeth. Ashalot, preparing to meet George, reminds him that if he wins, the girl will first go to him and then to Albana. This challenge shows his determination and confidence in his abilities. Georg speaks of his interest in one evil spirit, noting that such spirits prefer little girls. His words show that he is aware of the tastes of dangerous creatures and intends to use that knowledge. Ashalot holds Elizabeth in his arms, comforting her and telling her to be patient. Despite the severity of the situation, he tries to give her hope and confidence that everything will be all right. With a smile on his face, Georg states that he will not sacrifice the girl. This moment shows his unexpected kindness despite his cruel image. Ashalot asks Georg if he knows where he found Elizabeth. This question hints at Ashalot's deep connection and concern for the girl, emphasizing the importance of her safety. Georg, standing across from Ashalot, confidently replies that if he did not know, he would not have said so. His confidence elicits mixed feelings from those around him, ranging from bewilderment to admiration for his bravery. Hestia, who notices Georg's smile, wonders why he is smiling at such a tense moment. In that moment, she tries to understand his true intentions and what they should do next. Ashaloth, surrounded by magical spheres, warns his opponent that there will be nothing left of him. His determination and the power of magic evoke fear and admiration, emphasizing his willingness to defend Elizabeth to the end. Ashalot and Georg clash again, their magical powers colliding in a brilliant burst of light. Elizabeth is concerned that this is the 7th fight in a year. The residents realize that another battle could end in disaster. One witness declares with certainty that Georg will surely die at the hands of Ashaloth today, but another warns that someone is sure to intervene, despite the danger of contacting these powerful fighters. Georg, having assumed his new form, feels incredibly strong and is ready to fight Ashaloth, confident in his invulnerability. He boasts that his form is now resistant to both light and fire, rendering Ashaloth's magic useless. Meanwhile, Ashaloth reminds him that magically transforming into a creature taller than 8.5 meters violates the terms of the Great Pact, which could have serious consequences for Georg. Georg reacts scornfully to Ashaloth's words, confident that even if he is attacked, he will feel no pain. He is completely focused on his new form and ready for his next move. During the attack, Georg has no doubt that the laser magic will not do him any harm. He is confident in his invincibility and continues to move forward despite the warnings. However, Ashaloth's attack proves effective, striking Georg. Although Georg is surprised, he does not pay much attention to it, as his regeneration abilities allow him to heal his wounds quickly. Georg realizes that even if Ashaloth is able to tear off a couple of his limbs, it won't be a problem. He decides to focus on one point to deliver the decisive blow and end the fight. Ashaloth usually hides behind defensive magic, but right now he is completely defenseless. Georg realizes that it is time to deliver the final crushing blow and end this fight once and for all. The audience watches the fate of this epic battle unfold before their eyes. The outcome of the battle between Ashaloth and Georg remains unknown, but one thing is certain. The world will never be the same again after such a confrontation. Georg's only option is to use teleportation magic to avoid being hit. He tries desperately to dodge, but fear and determination are reflected on his face as he realizes he is facing a real threat. Ashaloth, having prepared in advance, uses counter magic to thwart Georg's attempt. He remains unfazed and confident, surrounded by purple magical auras, ready for the next step in the battle. Ashaloth demonstrates his power by delivering a powerful blow to Georg. He relishes the moment seeing his enemy suffer, which emphasizes his brutality and ruthlessness in the fight. Ashaloth decides to temporarily disable his counter magic, believing that Georg used teleportation to move some object out of the arena. Ashaloth wants to understand what his opponent is up to. Georg, desperate to escape, strikes back, but his strength is running out. Ashaloth stands confidently watching the situation, ready for his next maneuver. Ashaloth realizes with annoyance that Georg used an adamantium bullet to throw him off balance. He is angry at his enemy's trickery, but it only strengthens his resolve to finish the duel. Ashaloth reminds Georg that using magic beyond the speed of light violates the terms of the Great Treaty. He demands an explanation, which only increases the tension between them. Elizabeth, watching the battle, begins to worry that something could go wrong. She realizes that Georg is in danger and that at this rate he could be killed. Susanna wonders why Ashaloth is acting strangely if he could have ended the duel long ago. Her thoughts are filled with doubt and misunderstanding, and she begins to suspect that Ashaloth has ulterior motives. Elizabeth notices that Ashaloth is clearly winning, judging by the way the opponents have fallen silent. She realizes that the outcome of the fight is a foregone conclusion and watches the final battle anxiously. Something strange is happening inside Ashaloth that is disturbing. His body is emitting bright lights and strange energy currents, indicating an internal conflict or awakening of power. Elizabeth is concerned about Ashaloth's condition. She notices that he is not angry, and it is not the effects of a bad mood. It is something deeper and more dangerous. She realizes that Ashaloth will be in danger if this something leaves his body. Powerful currents of energy point to possible consequences that could threaten his life. Elizabeth decisively decides to act immediately. Although she herself does not understand why she has decided to do so, she feels the need to intervene immediately. Elizabeth summons Skula, the demon she stole from Centaurus Balzac. He is a summoned demon, and she hopes he can help with the situation. Skula, a first-class demon, is able to subdue evil spirits and weaker demons. Even Balzac had gone to great lengths to contract him. Skula was an exceptionally vain demon who deserved respect and honor. He himself knew this and was proud of his status among demons. When Skula had met his new contracted mate, Elizabeth, who put him down for almost nothing, he had been furious. Her treatment of him was humiliating. Elizabeth confidently declares that they can handle everything together. Her determination and belief in their strength gives Skula confidence in the success of their mission. Elizabeth and Skula team up to fight the threat. Elizabeth is determined to save Ashaloth, and together with Skula, they are ready to overcome any challenges. Elizabeth summons the demon Skull, who appears in the form of a cat. Skull immediately expresses his displeasure at the rough treatment from the summoner. He is clearly not happy about being summoned in this way. Elizabeth, meanwhile, ignores Skull's displeasure and continues to perform her actions. Squall, on the other hand, becomes angry and loudly declares that he hates his contractor. Squall demands the immediate termination of the contract, becoming indignant and loudly expressing his feelings. Elizabeth doesn't understand why the demon is so outraged and continues to insist on his point. Elizabeth decides to use force to forcibly send Squall to Ashaloth. Sparks sparkle in the air, and Skull continues to protest loudly, demanding that the contract be canceled. Skull eventually flies off towards Ashaloth, continuing to loudly demand the termination of the contract. Elizabeth is left to watch with dismay and wonder. As Squall flies away, Elizabeth runs up to him and tries to convince him to continue their tasks. She shouts that Squall must fly to the target. Elizabeth is watched by Suzanne, surprised at what is happening. She is amazed that Elizabeth is using a first-class demon to accomplish her tasks and asks her questions. Elizabeth only smiles nervously in response, not knowing how to explain her actions. Suzanne reminds her that it is contractually forbidden to treat the demon in this manner, but there is no penalty for a repeat call. Elizabeth realizes with alarm that if she doesn't stop Ashalot, something very bad will happen. She feels responsible for what has happened and cannot stand idly by. Elizabeth notices a strange glow coming from Ashalot. She realizes that she must act quickly to avert disaster and resolutely prepares for the next step. Elizabeth, concerned about the events to come, is not quite sure what she should fear. She suggests that Ashalot, who has returned from the arena, may attack the demon unexpectedly. Elizabeth is certain that Ashalot will attack the demon if she sees him in the arena. She feels the need to send a message to Ashalot that he needs to stop and not attack. Suddenly, the ground begins to shake, and Elizabeth turns around startled. Ashalot also feels the vibrations and suspects that it is Vasilios's shenanigans. As the surroundings collapse, the president's assistant informs him that someone else is to blame. However, the situation becomes increasingly dangerous, and Elizabeth's evacuation to safety is required. Cursing the demon that is destroying everything, the heroes discuss a plan of action. Elizabeth reflects on her contribution to the situation, realizing that the safety of her friend Suzanne is at risk. In the midst of the chaos, the protagonist realizes that the magical barrier is about to collapse. Everyone prepares to immediately teleport to safety. Elizabeth recognizes a spell she has known for years. This spell, which ended the War of the Magicians 50 years ago, can save everyone in danger. The character in the cloak claims that even the ability to regenerate won't help if he is hit. George won't be able to resurrect, and everyone in the place will die unless action is taken. The last hero with the blue crystal in his hand insists on immediate teleportation. Elizabeth must hold on to it tightly to save herself and avoid the destruction that is coming. Elizabeth disappeared in a gleam of light, leaving Ashalot confused. He was puzzled by her sudden disappearance and did not understand what had happened. The surroundings seemed frightening and strange to him. Ancient legend said that not only a human could summon a demon, but vice versa. Ashalot pondered over these words as he realized that the situation he was in confirmed the ancient myths. Elizabeth appears with a cat in her arms, and Susanna is standing nearby. The worried girl turns to Ashalot, trying to understand what happened and why he is here. She is frightened and doesn't know how to react. Elizabeth is relieved to notice that Ashalot doesn't seem to be angry with her. She looks at him hopefully and in anticipation of his reaction, feeling her heart beating faster and faster. Ashalot, holding Elizabeth in his arms, asks her the reason for her actions. The girl explains that she wanted to stop him and didn't know what else to do to stop what was happening. Ashalot is amazed that Elizabeth used magic that only skilled mages can control to stop him. He realizes that her actions were out of concern and a desire to protect him. Elizabeth asks Ashalot to stop, saying that she is fine and she doesn't want him to continue. She fears that he now hates her for interfering. Ashalot, feeling confused, assures Elizabeth that he never thought ill of her. He feels he must explain his actions and support her. Suddenly, George appears fierce and dangerous. He attacks Ashalot, giving him no time to be distracted. Ashalot realizes that a fight is inevitable and he needs to protect Elizabeth from this terrible enemy. Elizabeth and Ashalot meet after a long separation. Ashalot explains that he didn't leave because of hatred, but because he needed to deal with personal issues. Elizabeth is concerned, but he assures her that there is no animosity. Ashalot reveals that he was forced into a judicial duel, or Elizabeth would have been disenfranchised. She realizes that he went to the duel to protect her. Elizabeth asks Ashalot what he is doing here. He replies that this is Ethan Morse's doing and he has come to help her by being a witness. Suddenly, an intimidating lizard-like monster appears, interrupting their conversation. He demands that they stop talking and fight normally, preparing to attack. Elizabeth realizes that the monster's essence seeks to escape beyond the edge of reality. She is horrified by this discovery, realizing that the situation is critical. She recalls that there was no such mention even in the books. With the help of the Eye of Truth, Elizabeth sees what is hidden from ordinary sight and decides to act. She cradles the cat in her arms, trying to calm herself down. Elizabeth decides that she needs to stop Ashalot, realizing that he may be the key to solving the problem. Ashalot, realizing the strangeness of the situation, notices that there is a swirling inside Elizabeth. This important discovery causes him to consider his next plan of action. Ashalot activates the magic seal, speaking of the swirl. Elizabeth sees this swirl glistening and swirling inward, striking in its beauty and power. Joining forces, Ashalot and Elizabeth prepare for a decisive battle. Their confidence grows and they are ready to fight the monster to protect each other and the world around them. Ashalot notices that the huge orb summoned by Elizabeth has begun to grow, which should not be happening. He warns that this could lead to trouble if the vortex gets out of control. Ashalot, holding Elizabeth back, asks if she can see the edge of it. Elizabeth, a little embarrassed, answers in the affirmative, alluding to her unusual ability. Ashalot ponders the fact that one can only learn about the facet from someone else, but does not understand how Elizabeth sees it with her own eyes. His eyes are filled with doubt and wonder. Ashalot is aware of the state of his body and remembers how he used up all his magic after the battle with Centaurus Balzac. He needs at least a month to recover, which causes him concern. Elizabeth states with sincerity that she is not lying. Ashalot confirms that he believes her, showing his support and understanding in this important moment. Ashalot agrees with Elizabeth that his body is unable to allow powerful magic to flow through it right now. This admission strengthens their bond and trust in each other. Ashalot promised to protect Elizabeth at all costs, and now he feels it is his duty to keep that promise. He is willing to sacrifice himself for her safety. Elizabeth doesn't want Ashalot to take any risks for her. Her concern for him causes her tears and worry, which emphasizes her genuine concern for him. Ashalot does all of this of his own volition, expecting nothing in return. His eyes are determined, and he shows his willingness to act for her safety. Suzanne is relieved to see that Elizabeth is okay. Elizabeth, on the other hand, is perplexed as to why Ashalot would take such a risk, even though she warned him of the danger. Their mutual concern and care emphasize the depth of their relationship. Elizabeth decides that things cannot be left as they are and tries to change someone's mind. Susanna appears beside her and they decide to move to Ashalot once more. Elizabeth and Susanna find themselves in a dangerous position. Elizabeth is concerned about the magic the wizard is preparing to use. Susanna explains that even the most powerful magician would need at least half an hour to prepare this spell. Elizabeth is amazed and frightened. The dragon appears, yelling at the wizard and accusing him of trying to turn his body into a sieve. The tension builds. The dragon, blinded by rage, says he will not rest until he has destroyed his opponent. Light and shadows play across his face, giving the scene a dramatic quality. Suzanne notices that although the fire has not yet reached their part of the arena, the situation remains extremely dangerous. Elizabeth watches the scene anxiously. Elizabeth ponders the power of the spells used in the Great War. She feels as if an entire world is being reborn, filled with magic. Susanna warns Elizabeth about the magical pollution caused by the high density of magic. Elizabeth realizes the gravity of the situation. Elizabeth is confused and asks what is happening. Suzanne informs her that she is creating a magical barrier to protect them from danger. Elizabeth resolutely declares that she is not going anywhere, despite Susanna's pleas to leave. The scene is filled with determination and willingness to fight. Elizabeth decisively declares that she will save Ashalot no matter the dangers. The fire of determination burns in her eyes, and a white kitty sits on her shoulder, watching in amazement. Suzanne, with a serious expression on her face, tells Elizabeth that she has received orders from the vice president to guard her. Her voice is firm and determined to fulfill her mission. Someone approaches with a quick step, clearly intending to help. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, creating a sense of tense anticipation. Suzanne recalls how the stranger gave up his seat in the box for the special audience to sit among the common people. She ponders what an important person might have made such a decision. An assistant arrives and addresses Susanna, stating that he has brought Georg's head to help. The severed head lies on the floor, inspiring horror. Susanna thanks the assistant for eliminating the enemy, but wonders who needs his help now. She notices that there are no more enemies around. Elizabeth, standing next to Suzanne, expresses her gratitude, but adds that she doesn't need protection. There is confidence and strength in her voice. The deputy wonders how a little girl can save Ashalot. He expresses his bewilderment, believing that Elizabeth will not be able to do it. Elizabeth, with hot eyes, confidently declares that she can handle it. She cradles the kitty, who is clearly worried about her mistress. A stranger stands beside Elizabeth and claims to have heard her desire to save Ashalot. He offers to help her in this difficult endeavor. The man points to the girl with the cat and says that she is just a child and no one expects big things from her. However, looking at her, the man reminds Susanna of the shame that comes from protecting a child. Balrog continues to talk about protecting the girl and asks Susanna why she remained silent when the mages from Elbana asked for the girl to be handed over to them. He clearly doubts her intentions. Balrog questions why Susanna did not condemn Ithanu for bringing the girl to a dangerous place. He also expresses doubts about Ethan's good intentions and questions Susanna's naivety. Susanna vehemently states that she is not protecting the girl because of her age. She talks about the tense negotiations that nearly led to war and claims that being sent to Helland would not have been terrible for the girl. Suzanne emphasizes that not asking the girl about her wishes and deciding for her where she will live is not a defense. She points out the importance of considering her opinion. Balrog reaches out and promises to help. He says confidently that they can work this situation out together, despite the difficulties. Elizabeth, holding the cat, curiously asks the wizard his name. Her eyes show surprise and hope for the future. Elizabeth firmly states that she wants both Hestia and Balrog to help her. She sees them as allies and hopes for their support in this dangerous world. Balrog agrees to help, but doubts that Hestia will join her. Elizabeth is confident that Hestia will support her, and together they will overcome all obstacles. Elizabeth notices that she can now see the very essence of Ashaloth that she had not noticed before. This stunning revelation leads to new realizations. Looking at Ashaloth, she now sees not only his emotions, but also his thoughts. Ashaloth's essence rages like an ocean, and it allows her to see so much more than before. Suzanne asks Naga if Ashaloth really thinks this way, and why. Her question expresses surprise and bewilderment at what she has learned. Ashaloth's thoughts are filled with rage. He thinks that if he kills everyone, he will eliminate the need to participate in these damn negotiations. This emphasizes his determination and willingness to take extreme measures. Hestia once again declares that she will flee the association as soon as this is over. However, her protests are heard for the 549,677th time, emphasizing the futility of her efforts. Nagi tries to reassure everyone by saying that in hard times it is better to hope for the best. He asks if his words have made everyone feel better, but is unsure of their effect. Susanna objects that how can they be calmer when they are about to fight a monster like Ashaloth? She is determined and ready for battle. Nagi explains that he was referring to Ashaloth's strength by comparing him to a monster. He encourages everyone to gather and prepare for the challenges ahead. Balrog notices that someone else is still giving signs of life inside. The distorted space indicates Ashaloth's presence. This gives hope that he can be rescued. Balrog explains the plan: disarm Ashaloth and allow Elizabeth to make contact with him. He is convinced that if they accomplish both items, they can save Ashaloth. Balrog, concerned about the current situation, asks Nagi for a summary of what is happening. At this point, Nagi, as a strategist mage, offers to retreat, realizing the difficulty of the situation. The atmosphere is heated. Every move could prove decisive. Nagi ponders the chances of saving Ashaloth, recognizing that he himself does not fully understand how to do so. He realizes that survival in the event of failure is nearly impossible. Even in poor shape, Ashaloth is a serious danger. Suddenly, Elizabeth appears, radiant with joy. She shares that her spirits told her that today's lucky color is gold. Her optimism and faith gives hope to the team, inspiring them to keep going. Nagi decides that trying to save Ashaloth is worth the risk. He smiles, full of confidence and determination. His optimism and belief in success energizes everyone around him. No one now doubts the need to take decisive action. While the others prepare for battle, Ashaloth appears in a furious rage. He is surrounded by fire and looks at his enemies with contempt. Tension rises. Everyone realizes that avoiding a fight is impossible. Ethan reproaches Wayne that he could not restrain himself and created a lot of trouble. The situation heats up, and the disagreements within the team complicate the preparation for the decisive battle. It is important to find common ground and act together. Balrog, clearly disturbed, asks where the walking corpse has gone. He realizes that as soon as the protective barrier cracked, the enemy instantly headed to his workshop to prepare for the next attack. Nagi realizes that the enemy was planning to sneak away from the start. He realizes that the enemy has been preparing in advance because Nagi is his opponent. This confrontation requires full mobilization of strength and knowledge. The enemy confidently asserts that Georg was the one who opposed him. He recognizes Nagi's strength and understands that the choice was inevitable. Their fight will be a decisive moment that will determine the outcome of the entire battle. In the tense atmosphere of the confrontation, Vane reproaches the enemy for bringing the girl as a witness. The enemy explains that this is an obvious move, since she is the subject of their dispute. This last straw escalates the situation to the breaking point. Ashalot threatens Ethan more, demanding that he stop pandering to him or he'll turn him to ash. Ethan, though appearing confident, doubts the obvious solutions. Ethan apologizes, admitting that he himself isn't sure of anything yet. His calmness and indecision contrast with Ashalot's threats. Ashalot demonstrates his power by creating whirlwinds of fire around him. He intends to see if Ethan can keep talking when all that's left of him is his head. Ethan, despite his threats, calmly remarks that the time for such experiments is not yet ripe. He remains cool and calm, even in such a dangerous situation. Magical techniques and curses weaken Ethan's field of vision, creating additional tension. He recognizes the danger, but maintains his concentration. Ethan realizes he can't see anything because of the weakening magic. He is reassured, however, knowing that he has already taken care of Georg and that the only battle mage capable of attacking him in such a situation has already been neutralized. It becomes clear that the assistant mage Hestia Milla and the mage strategist Nagiran Lugas are his closest allies. They are ready to support him at any moment. Each is a serious adversary capable of protecting Ethan and fighting at his side. Ethan confidently relies on their support, ready for any challenge that may arise. Balrog, radiating anger and determination, questions Ashaloth if he might miss the first strike. His anger is evident on his face, and he is ready to fight his opponent. Ashaloth, with violet eyes, states in a calm voice that his vision is back to normal. He seems focused and ready for action. Elizabeth, holding a magical artifact, says she is forced to take extreme measures to prevent the drought and urges Nagi to use all means to disable the enemy. Ashaloth looks at the rain and declares that despite its cursedness, it is still just rain. He remains calm and shows his strength and confidence. Explosion and fire scene. Ashaloth decides to vaporize his enemy using a powerful spell, showing his determination and strength. The man with white hair cries out in desperation that they only have a minute left before Ashaloth's setting sun will unleash a veritable inferno. He's ready to run if their plan doesn't work. Ashaloth, in the light of the sunset, asks with confidence if anyone thinks he can be defeated by simply neutralizing the setting sun. He radiates confidence and strength. Balrog declares that trying is not torture. His face expresses determination. He is ready for the next step in the battle despite the dangers. Nagi, bleeding, recognizes that Ashaloth is Aragold's strongest battle mage and is proud to concede the title to him. He shows respect for Ashaloth's power and skills. Elizabeth and Nagi are exhausted from their wounds. Nagi complains about Ashaloth's lack of shame and conscience, accusing him of using magic against his allies. Elizabeth supports him despite her wounds. Balrog, exhausted but determined, declares that he has another trump card up his sleeve, hinting at a secret weapon or magic that could change the outcome of the battle. His face, despite his fatigue, expresses hope and readiness for the final battle. Ashaloth, with a cold and contemptuous stare, cuts off Balrog's monologue, stating that he should have died long ago. His eyes burn with purple fire, emphasizing his power and ruthlessness in this confrontation. Balrog, despite his bleeding and wounds, assures that he is serious and is resorting to the very last resort. His resolve is unwavering, and he is willing to give his all to win, knowing that this is his last chance. At that moment, the demon skull takes the form of a white cat, and the situation changes dramatically. Elizabeth realizes that the demon's presence means danger, but also possible salvation if she uses the magical traces left around her. Elizabeth is startled when she notices Ashaloth calling his name. She flies to him with desperation in her eyes, hoping to save and understand him. Ashaloth is her only chance of victory and of uncovering the truth. As she wraps her arms around Ashaloth, Elizabeth rejoices that he did not push her away. It gives her hope that there is still a light within him that she can rekindle despite the darkness that surrounds his heart. She realizes that Ashaloth doesn't have much of a choice. As there is a lot of dangerous magic around, the power that surrounds them could be their doom or salvation if they can use it correctly. Elizabeth holds back her feelings, realizing that now is not the time to admire Ashalot. She must find a way to save him and understand what caused him to fall into darkness, for their future depends on it. Elizabeth decides to look into Ashalot's mind to find out his true motives. She intends to delve deeper into the recesses of his mind, hoping to find answers and paths to salvation there. Once in the mysterious space, Elizabeth wonders why Ashalot is so reliant on the judicial duel. She senses his essence and begins to better understand his motives and aspirations. Elizabeth realizes that if the outcome of the dispute depended solely on Ashalot's power and fame, everything would have been resolved during the negotiation phase of her fate. But she realizes that the problem lies deeper. Ashalot's energy reserves are running low, and this is becoming a serious problem. He won't be able to continue fighting unless he can find a way to restore his strength. Battle mages often fight for days at a time, and they need internal energy replenishment so they don't feel hungry and thirsty in battle. Elizabeth realizes this is important to their survival. When Ashalot's energy reserves were depleted, he had to almost completely sacrifice his reserves to defeat centaurus Balzac. It was a risky move, but necessary for his goals. Ashalot's body had reached a critical state, and he could pass out at any moment. Elizabeth realizes how dangerous the situation is and how close Ashalot is to losing consciousness completely. If the mage, whose energy reserves are nearly depleted, falls asleep, it will take at least a month for him to fully recover. Elizabeth realizes it's a long process and time is not on their side. Ashalot wanted to find a worthy mentor for Elizabeth before his powers finally ran out. He sought to secure her safety and future while he could still act. He wished to find a man who would protect Elizabeth and like herself. Elizabeth realizes that Ashalot cared for her more than he cared for himself, and it touches her to the core. Everyone involved in the trial wanted to use Elizabeth for their own ends. She realizes that her fate is important to many and realizes that her future now depends on the outcome of the trial that Ashalot precipitated. Ashalot has gone on a rampage for a reason. He intimidated the participants in the trial to the point where they would not even think of trying to subdue him. By his actions, he sowed fear in order to protect himself from interference. As a result of his actions, many were severely injured and some died. Balrog is shocked at the consequences Ashalot has left behind. The blood on the ground testifies to the devastating actions and loss. Elizabeth thinks of George, who, though she disliked, did not deserve to die. She realizes that his death is the result of the chaos created by Ashalot. The tragedy and loss make her question the rightness of what is happening. She recognizes that she does not know Ashalot well and cannot hate him. His actions are contradictory, but Elizabeth's image in his mind sparks warmth, which confuses her and causes conflicting feelings. Elizabeth is happy that Ashalot treats her in a special way, but inner doubts torment her. She wonders if she likes what he is doing. His beautiful intentions don't always lead to the right thing to do. Balrog argues that perpetual fighting and intimidation are not solutions to problems. His perspective on the situation is at odds with Ashalot's methods. He expresses his frustration and dissatisfaction with the constant violence. Elizabeth wants to stop Ashalot and save him. She realizes that his actions lead to destruction and suffering, but believes that another way can be found. She fears she is asking too much by trying to change him. A disturbed Elizabeth continues to reflect on Ashalot's actions. She realizes that his actions are not always right, despite his good intentions. This struggle for his soul becomes a personal challenge for her. Her image in Ashalot's mind gives her strength. She sees that despite the cruelty of his actions, there is a light within him that is connected to her image. This hope helps her to believe in his salvation. Strong emotions overwhelm Elizabeth. She's ready to fight for Ashalot despite the odds. Her goal is not only to stop him, but to help him find the right path. The internal struggle continues, but she doesn't give up. Elizabeth laments that she did not have the strength to overpower the elder lich. She blames herself for what happened and believes that if she had been stronger, none of this would have happened. This guilt makes her want to become stronger for the sake of protecting those around her. Elizabeth decides that she wants to become stronger, not because of her role as the protagonist, but for the sake of being useful in the here and now. She seeks to grow personally and improve her abilities in order to protect those she cares about. Ashalot finds himself injured, and Elizabeth is concerned about his condition. She asks if he is okay, ready to help her comrade. Their mutual support and concern shows how important they are to each other in this dangerous world. Ashalot ponders how Elizabeth can remain so calm after seeing his true nature. He is surprised by her reaction and ponders her fortitude and ability to see him as something more than just a monster. All who have tried to subdue Ashaloth have retreated in fear, seeing only a monster before them. He reminisces about his previous masters and how they were unable to deal with his essence, unlike Elizabeth, who saw him as human. Elizabeth cares about Ashalot's condition and assures him that once his magic is restored, he will no longer be in pain. She tries to reassure him and show her support despite his worries and doubts. Elizabeth asks Balrog for a favor for his help. She hopes that her support deserves a favor in return. Their relationship is built on mutual help and respect, which strengthens their alliance. Balrog agrees not to kill anyone in response to Elizabeth's request. He values her input and is willing to compromise for her trust and their common cause. The mutual respect between them plays a key role in their interaction. Elizabeth is surprised by Balrog's ability to anticipate her thoughts. She admires his intuition and ability to understand her without words, which strengthens their bond and trust in each other. Balrog explains that he simply guessed her thoughts due to their shared intuition. He promises to think about her request, showing that he is willing to consider her opinion and go out of his way for the common good. Ashalot is concerned that others will try to use Elizabeth as a pawn in their games. He realizes that no matter the outcome of the fight, it will end badly for her, which causes him serious doubt and worry. Ashalot decides that if he destroys all of his enemies, they will not be able to revive for at least a month. During that time, he will regain his powers, and his enemies will no longer be able to do evil. His resolve strengthens, and he makes plans. Elizabeth, realizing the gravity of the situation, begins to worry that everyone will hate Ashalot for his actions. Her concern is evident on her face, and she cannot hide her emotions from Ashalot. Ashalot does not hesitate to state that he does not care since they already hate him. He is determined in his actions, regardless of the consequences, and his cold stare confirms it. Elizabeth pleads with Ashalot not to make the situation worse and make him even more hated. Her anxiety growing, she tries to convince Ashalot that another solution is necessary. Ashalot believes there is no other solution. His gaze is full of determination. He sees no alternatives. Elizabeth, looking at him, decides that another way must be sought and assures herself of this. Elizabeth suddenly realizes that she didn't know what to do until she heard Ashalot's thoughts. She remembers something important that could change the course of events. Her decision becomes clear. After recalling useful information, Elizabeth finds the answer in the book, The Walfer Story. She feels that this key point will help them in their fight against their enemies. The book becomes a hope for success. Elizabeth is confident that she knows how to win the negotiations with Elbana. Her determination is reflected in her gaze, and she is ready to act. Ashalot is surprised and intrigued by her newfound confidence. Ashaloth asks Elizabeth if she can suggest a way to shut her enemies' mouths. She answers in the affirmative, reinforcing his belief in their success. Their alliance grows even stronger, and they prepare for a new phase of the fight. Elizabeth informs Ashalot that the creatures from Elbana want him to give her to them because he once wronged them badly. The girl offers to convince them that the other centurion Balzac is far worse to avoid negotiations. Elizabeth assures Ashalot that she can prove that Balzac's plans were far worse than his actions. She is determined to help him and protect them both from trouble despite the risks. Ethan, the vice president of the Magicians Association, has no intention of crossing Ashalot. He offers his support if Ashalot decides to trust Elizabeth. At the same time, he promises not to interfere if Ashaloth chooses a different path. Ethan adds that if Ashalot is willing to trust Lily, Elizabeth, he will be on his side. However, if Ashalot chooses a different option, Ethan will not stand in the way of that decision. Ashalot realizes that they will not have another chance to kill their enemies at the same time. He decides to act quickly and decisively to avert disaster and protect Elizabeth. He is convinced that with the Wise Serpent Medical Association, there is no need to worry. Their base will be destroyed and they will scatter like rats in panic, thus eliminating one of the threats. However, the Urgold Mage Association poses a different danger altogether. Ashaloth explains that his battle techniques are designed for large-scale attacks, but the mages have no bases, so each mage will have to be fought individually. Ashalot asks Elizabeth if she is willing to go to Holland if their plan fails. She replies that she won't go anywhere and doesn't even want to think about it. Elizabeth declares that she will negotiate until her enemies agree to their terms. She is determined to succeed and will not back down in the face of adversity. Ashalot ponders that Elizabeth could have simply obeyed him if she did not want to go to extreme measures. Despite this, he realizes that his reputation has long since gone down the drain and accepts her help. Ashalot convinces Elizabeth to take it easy and try to hold out for 1 month. If the plan fails and she falls into the hands of her enemies, the consequences could be disastrous. Her anxiety increases, but deep down she trusts his words. Elizabeth realizes in despair that her plan has failed. Ashalot reassures her, reminding her that he is not going to kill anyone as she had planned. Her world is crumbling, but she realizes that there are other ways to solve the problem. Ashalot, holding Elizabeth in his arms, asserts that he has won in the past and will be able to do it again. His confidence gives her hope. She sees him as strong and determined, ready to face any threat. Elizabeth thanks Ashalot with a genuine smile. His support and protection are invaluable to her. She feels safe in this moment, realizing that she will be able to handle any hardship next to him. Nagi, watching them, realizes that if Elizabeth does get captured, Ashaloth will rush in and destroy everyone without exception. His words are frightening yet admiring in his determination. Susanna resents Ashalot's actions, believing that he has lost his mind. She recalls how much effort has gone into preventing the war and accuses him of provocation. Her emotions rage. She doesn't understand his actions. Nagi notices with irritation that Balrog is still keeping his distance after their breakup. He reproaches him for his callousness and lack of understanding. Balrog, on the other hand, remains calm, confident in his decisions despite Nagi's reproaches. Balrog reflects on the current situation. He considers Skumu to be the best of the best, but his treatment as trash makes him angry. He is ready to stage a revolt to restore justice and protect his allies. Balrog decides to request the termination of his contract with Skuma. His resolve is firm. He is no longer willing to tolerate injustice. This determination is evident in his actions. He will no longer put up with arbitrary behavior. Ashalot, with Elizabeth in his arms, concludes the judicial duel. He is convinced that after such a showdown, their enemies will surrender themselves. Elizabeth feels his strength and protection, realizing that he will always be there for her. Elizabeth looks at Ashalot with hope in her eyes and asks if he will stay with her. Ashalot agrees, and their eyes reflect joy and warmth, as if a bright future is opening up before them. Ashalot confidently affirms his intentions to stay with Elizabeth. His calm gaze and sincere words give her confidence and make her heart beat faster with joy. The white-haired watcher comments wryly that even if Ashalot stays, it won't help with the cleanup of the grounds. His words sound harsh, but their true meaning remains a mystery. Two familiars with green eyes stare at the newcomers in surprise, wondering if they are guests or trespassers. Their large eyes express genuine curiosity and confusion. Elizabeth has never seen familiars before and exclaims in amazement. The familiars, recognizing Ashalot, call him the Lord's godson, confirming his high status and importance. One of the familiars welcomes Ashalot and Elizabeth to the Whitescale mansion, offering his services. His friendly smile and openness create an atmosphere of hospitality and comfort. Ashaloth, holding Elizabeth in his arms, asks for a room and something to drink. His voice sounds calm and confident, and the familiars are instantly taken to fulfill the request. The familiars spring into action, carrying out Ashaloth's errand. One of them asks who the girl in Ashalot's arms is, expressing genuine interest in the newcomer. Elizabeth admiringly surveys the lavish surroundings and wonders where they are. Ashaloth explains that they are in one of the Vasilios' country houses, which only heightens her impressions. Elizabeth realizes why the familiars referred to Ashaloth as the Lord's godson. This discovery causes her to marvel and wonder, adding a new level of respect for Ashaloth. Elizabeth, sitting on the floor, is perplexed as to why Ashaloth brought her here. He explains that he wants her to relax and rest. Elizabeth feels embarrassed but decides to follow his advice. Upon reflection, Elizabeth realizes that Ashalot often tells her to sleep. She smiles, realizing that he cares for her despite his stern exterior. The servants bring Elizabeth juice and offer her pajamas. They try to make her stay comfortable, and Elizabeth feels grateful for their attention and care. Elizabeth notices that the offered pajamas are too small for her. She is puzzled as to why the children's clothes are here and begins to question the place she is in. Ashot explains that the house is used by the disciples of Vasilios and those he sponsors. This explains the presence of children's clothing. Elizabeth realizes that children frequent the place. She asks Ashot if he grew up here. Ashot replies that he came to this place as an adult, having been involved in a court case. Elizabeth realizes that his past is full of secrets. Upon hearing of Ashot's involvement in the trial, Elizabeth is shocked. She begins to realize that he has also had difficulties in his life. Elizabeth reflects on the fact that Ashot was forcibly brought to this place. She hopes that he had someone to help him and sympathizes with his experiences. Elizabeth explains that her interest in his past is not due to curiosity, but a desire to understand him better. Ashot decides to tell her his story, as it is not a secret. Ashot begins to tell Elizabeth about his past. He wants her to understand the trials he went through. Elizabeth listens with excitement and sympathy, realizing how difficult his life has been. Elizabeth ponders her feelings for Ashot, confused by thoughts of his power and importance to her. She is troubled by doubts about whether he will be able to take on the role she has assigned to him. After all, he is a great wizard. Elizabeth realizes that she cannot rely on Ashot forever. She decides to become stronger and more independent so that she will not depend only on his magical abilities and always be a worthy partner to him. Elizabeth and Ashot are walking through the forest. She decides to strengthen her abilities to help him in the future. Her desire to become stronger is based on her desire to be his equal and not be a burden. Elizabeth offers Ashot her help in negotiating with Albana. He, in turn, shows concern for her by offering to change and prepare first. Elizabeth worries that she might make a mistake and suggest the wrong thing. She worries about the consequences, but her determination pushes her to take action despite her fears. Ashot assures Elizabeth that he is prepared for any turn of events and that there is no need to take full responsibility since he volunteered to help her. Elizabeth reflects on her deep connection to Ashot, especially after having traveled inside his mind. This revelation strengthens her resolve and understanding of their shared purpose. Ashot reassures Elizabeth by offering her rest and assuring her that he will stay with her. His care and support becomes an important pillar for her in their journey together. Vasil angrily questions how such an oversight could have been allowed. His rage, mixed with despair, expresses concern for Elizabeth, who has been disadvantaged by inappropriate care and guardianship. He cannot believe that Elizabeth was dressed in some rags when he had special outfits prepared for her. His resentment grows when he rebukes him for choosing the wrong room for her, despite having better options. Vasil is suddenly softened when he hears a familiar voice. He realizes that someone close to him is in front of him, and joy is mixed with surprise when he recognizes a friend in the voice. Elizabeth wakes up, her slightly disheveled hair and sleepy face suggesting a recent awakening. She tries to make sense of her surroundings, getting used to her surroundings. Elizabeth is shocked by the news that Vasil has been killed. Vasil, however, calms her down, explaining that it was only his double, and he himself is perfectly fine and even in top form. He hugs her, expressing his sadness at not being able to see how she had fared in his absence. Nevertheless, Vasil marvels at her genius in using the demon to move. Vasil, seeing that Elizabeth is awake, offers to eat and travel. His words are full of determination and care, seeking to prepare her for the events to come. Ashot and Elizabeth arrive at the meeting hall of the Magicians' Association. Elizabeth anxiously embraces him, feeling safe in his presence. Vasil explains that there will be an important meeting of the association today, and Elizabeth will need to speak of her plan. Her excitement grows, but Vasil's support helps her cope with her anxiety. At the meeting, the senior members of the organization will decide important matters. Ashot, Belrod, Hestia, and Nagi, along with Vasil and Elizabeth, are ready to discuss strategically important topics for further action. Elizabeth was pleasantly surprised when her friend Vasil revealed that he hid a certain item in his place so it wouldn't break. Vasil was always concerned about the safety of things, which showed his concern for his friends. Vassal laughed and teased Elizabeth's surprise as he pointed out the doors hanging in the air. Elizabeth was amazed at their magic and replied, slightly embarrassed, that each door led to another dimension. Elizabeth stood in front of one of these doors, deciding if she should open it herself. Her hands trembled slightly with excitement and anticipation, for she knew that behind the door lurked something marvelous. Balrod, a senior member of the Mage Association, greeted Elizabeth warmly, noting that summoning required a lot of mental energy. He was glad to see her and offered to rest her after her tedious journey. Squall, a cat-shaped demon, grumbled unhappily that his contractor was neglecting him. His master had no health complaints, but Squall was clearly unhappy with his situation. Elizabeth, upon seeing Squall, apologized and tried to reassure him. She admitted that she had completely forgotten about him, which caused Squall to burst out in indignation. Cruelty! Rude! No respect! Ethan, the vice president of the Mages Association, noted with a smile that even a sorceress with the eye of truth couldn't always handle demons. He thanked Elizabeth for the journey and motioned for her to take a seat. Elizabeth, slightly nervous, thanked Ethan and tried to calm down. Ethan noticed her agitation and gently said that there was no reason to worry. They just wanted to hear her out. Ethan emphasized that even if the plan Elizabeth had proposed was doomed to failure, they would do everything they could to make it happen. His words inspired confidence and hope. Elizabeth reflected on how friendly Ethan had spoken to her, but in the back of her mind she felt a slight uneasiness. Something in his tone made her doubtful. Elizabeth burst into the room, apologizing for being late. Hestia laughs joyfully as she greets her. Elizabeth's face shows fear and embarrassment. The atmosphere is lively and friendly despite her tardiness. Ethan sternly reminds Elizabeth of the importance of separating work and personal life. He adds that being late will count as a new duty. Elizabeth apologizes, realizing the gravity of the situation. Ashot is visibly annoyed by what is happening. His essence is literally boiling with resentment. Elizabeth senses the tension and tries to understand the reason for his anger. All the participants have gathered around a large round table. Ethan announces the beginning of the meeting and asks Miss Lily to tell more about her idea. There is an atmosphere of anticipation and attention in the room. Hestia mentions the ship they were aboard with Ashot. The ship was carrying experimental combat equipment for the Imperial Army. Everyone listens to her with interest and some concern. Ethan asks what exactly the ship was carrying. Hestia explains that there was some sort of improved magical cloth on board, at least that's what the report said. Elizabeth reveals the truth that underneath the long name was a powerful magical bomb, the Flame of Taranto. Her voice is full of anxiety and insistence. She is clearly trying to convey important information to everyone present. An intimidating image of one of the Lich Elders, Centaurus Balzac, who wanted to steal the bomb and start a war, appears. His menacing appearance and actions add drama to what is happening. Elizabeth continues the story by explaining that if Ashot had not killed Centaurus Balzac, he would have stolen the Flame of Taranto and started a war. Holland's mages would have continued their cruel experiments on humans, making the situation even worse. Elizabeth concludes her speech by arguing that both starting a war and experimenting on humans are far worse than what Ashot did. She hopes that these arguments will make everyone think and realize the seriousness of the situation, especially El Banu. Ethan, the vice president of the Magicians Association, approaches Elizabeth, asking for confirmation of important information. He explains that they need proof to succeed in the negotiations, and it's the key to their victory. Elizabeth resolutely raises her hand, assuring Ethan and Belrod that she has the proof that will help them in their negotiations. She is determined and confident in her words. Elizabeth points to Squall, a demon in the shape of a cat, and declares that he is the very proof. Her eyes burn with determination, showing the seriousness of her intentions. Balrod confirms that Skulla is the demon who contracted with Balzac Center and attacked the flying ship. This means that Skulla surely knows his master's plans, which is an important fact. Skulla, angry and frightened, hisses when he learns that the contractor has stolen his memories. This information throws him off balance, making the situation even more tense. Elizabeth mentally admits that the only thing she saw from Skulla's mind was the Taranto flames on the ship. She can't tell them that she learned the rest of the information from a book, but she realizes it's true. Skula tries to justify himself, saying he has the right not to share information about the previous contractor. Elizabeth insists that he tell everything he knows, as it is important to their case. Elizabeth firmly reminds Squall that she is now his contractor, not some centerfold Balzac. Her confidence makes Sculla hesitate and accept her terms. Sculla, in surrender, accepts the new contractor's terms, showing her loyalty and willingness to cooperate. This is a turning point in their conversation. Elizabeth, full of hope, asks Ethan and Balrod since they have proof if they can win the negotiation. Her confidence instills hope in their hearts. Ethan examines the documents handed to him by Miss Lily, scrutinizing them for accuracy. He admits that he has not yet found any errors in her arguments, but still needs confirmation. Elizabeth asks Ethan hopefully if they can prevail. Ethan, grinning slightly, replies that they at least have a good reason to stop negotiating. With genuine delight, Elizabeth notices that their plan has worked. She hopes that Ashalot is now at peace as well. Her eyes glow with joy and relief. However, the magical power emanating from Ashaloth suddenly fills the room with a whirlwind of energy. Elizabeth is horrified, wondering why he's so enraged and what could have made him so angry. Ashaloth, sitting on his throne, calms Elizabeth, assuring her that her worries are in vain. He asks her not to worry and assures her that it is not about her. Elizabeth is still confused, wondering what could have upset Ashalot so much. Her thoughts are confused, and she cannot understand the true reason for his anger. The group decides to act as if the negotiations with the elven Elbana never happened. They hope this will help avoid unwanted consequences and advance their cause. Ethan, hoping to confirm their hunch, is confronted by Elizabeth's confused look. She clearly did not expect such a complication and looks at him with bewilderment. Ethan asks Miss Lily to wait outside with her demon until they finish discussing a plan of action. Elizabeth quietly agrees, realizing the importance of the current meeting. Ethan wonders if Jade Leon knows anything about the Taranto flame. Ashalot, hearing this, agrees that she probably does. Their thoughts are consumed by this new mysterious element. Balrod ponders that Elizabeth's testimony will be enough to defame Elbana in the eyes of the other mages. He suggests calling a meeting of the 7 magical schools and accusing Elbana right at the meeting so that all the mages will know the truth. Nagi, worried about Elizabeth's safety, rebukes Balrod for not thinking of the consequences for her. He is certain that she will definitely not be left alone after the accusations. He insists that war with Elbana must be started immediately, or Elizabeth will be in mortal danger as the only valuable witness. Hestia argues that the war will not end until all enemies are dead, and urges them to fight to the last man. Balrod replies that then all enemies will have to be destroyed. He criticizes Hestia for her narrow vision and inability to see beyond current problems. Nagi explodes, arguing that there was simply no other option. He reminds them that continuing the war could have destroyed half the continent. Nagi insists that the calling of wizards is to fight an absurd reality and rebukes Balrod for running away from his duties as a wizard. Ethan reminds Nagi of the fate of the kingdom of Carbon, destroyed because of the indecision of its leaders. He asks if Nagi wants to repeat that fate, accusing him of indecision. Nagi vehemently objects that Ethan knows nothing and will not understand why Roxanne did what she did. Tia, trying to calm Nagi down, reminds him that Ethan is holding back too and asks him to calm down. However, Nagi is determined and unwilling to give in to his opinion, continuing to insist on his point of view. Ethan sums it up by saying that too much time has passed to fight over those who are already dead. He thinks it's foolish to continue conflicts over the past and that they need to move on. Nagi recognizes that Balrod is right in his opinion about Roxanne O'Brien's indecisiveness in hesitating too long, which led to a worse decision. He acknowledges the mistakes of the past, but insists on the need to act decisively in the present. Balrod assures that he is not trying to take Hestia's side, but insists that there will be no war. He demands an explanation from Nagi and the other participants in the meeting to understand their position and come to a common decision. Ethan, realizing the tension and disagreement among the meeting participants, urges them to be calm and rational. He insists on the need to discuss all the arguments and proposals in order to find the most reasonable and safe solution for all the mages and Elizabeth. Vassal reminded the allies that the process of resurrecting Athanasia is almost complete, and this should affect their plans. This statement caused everyone to realize the importance of the upcoming events and the need to be prepared. Elizabeth emphasized that despite their ability to win without Athanasia, she was against the immediate start of the war. She cautioned against hoping too much for eternal peace, realizing the unpredictability of the future. Ethan agreed that it would take time to prepare and suggested starting the war the moment Athanasia awakened. It was a strategic decision based on opportunity and resources. Ethan, knowing that their adversaries would not stop conducting human experiments, pointed out the need for action. He realized how much benefit could be derived from these cruel experiments and sought to stop them. Elizabeth, seeing Ashot, asked curiously if the meeting was over already. There was a gleam of enthusiasm in her eyes that indicated she was ready for new adventures and challenges. Suddenly her gaze changed and she sensed something wrong. It was an unexpected sensation that made her wary and pay attention to the details around her. Ashaloth, noticing her confusion, gently rebuked her not to look too closely. It was his way of keeping her out of possible trouble and protecting her. Elizabeth, trying to explain her behavior, admitted that she was just seeing things through. Ashalot, however, pointed out that this habit could harm her and suggested that she learn to control her abilities. He explained that if her brain exceeded the limit of information it could process, it would become overloaded. It was an important warning that could save her a lot of trouble. Vasil, who also adhered to the restrictions after contracting with the two supreme demons, confirmed her fears. He understood how important it was to adhere to those limits for the sake of overall safety and success. Ethan doesn't trust Elizabeth. While Athanasia is in hibernation, a mage with the Eye of Truth appears, making Ethan suspicious. Wayne, Ethan is certain that Elizabeth's appearance right now is no accident. He believes she showed up specifically for Vane. Ethan notes that her knowledge of the world is too biased, as if someone taught her the necessary things beforehand, which raises even more suspicion. Ethan also states that the others are willing to do the most absurd things just to subdue a demon. He reminds Wayne that he knows this better than anyone. Ethan emphasizes that everyone should take a sober look at what's going on. If his assumptions are wrong, he'll be glad, but if not, Elizabeth is either brainwashed or a cultist. Vane ponders that he can't read her memories or verify her words, which adds uncertainty to the situation. Elizabeth asks Ashalot why he's looking at her like that, to which Ashalot replies that it's no big deal. Ethan reports that the committee has determined Elizabeth's punishment for using summoning magic without authorization, which is the first time in 3 years. Ethan explains that until Elizabeth reaches adulthood, she will have to ask permission from a guardian or mentor every time she uses summoning magic. Also, once Elizabeth becomes a level 3 or higher mage, she will need to work for 3 years in the association without a salary, much to her surprise. Elizabeth ponders that it would be nice to get rid of having to get permission to use summoning magic every time. She worries that the age of majority for a mage is determined by the level of magical powers, and if something goes wrong, she'll have to wait until she's 30. Elizabeth assures herself that she will reach the right level to become an adult. She is determined to prove her power and abilities, despite the possible difficulties and obstacles that may arise along the way. Elizabeth firmly believes that she can reach adulthood by the age of 20. She is confident in her abilities and is willing to work hard to achieve this goal to prove to everyone, including herself, that she is capable of more. The Magicians Union selects candidates to be a guardian and mentor for Elizabeth. Although she has a choice, she is advised to approach this wisely to find the right person to support and guide her. Vasil, one of Elizabeth's friends, clearly does not like the idea of being a mentor for her. Despite his reaction, Elizabeth is confident in her decision and grateful for the support she receives from him and others. Elizabeth realizes that soon she will have to leave and stay with someone else. This causes her anxiety, and she begins to wonder who she can trust in this new situation. If choosing from the members of the association, Ethan Morse is the best option for Elizabeth. Despite his oddities, he is smart and reliable. Since she has paid her debt, he won't touch her. Vasil, despite his suspicions, decides not to dig into Elizabeth's memories. He still finds her suspicious, but hesitates to interfere with her past, realizing the importance of trust. Elizabeth will live in a new house surrounded by a barrier for security, The place will be secure, and Vassal, despite his jealousy, must make this decision for her sake. If Elizabeth suddenly needs something, she will be able to get the amount she needs from the bank by showing the key and giving Ethan's name. This gives her a sense of security and stability in her new place. Elizabeth discovers information in the book about a golden key from the Golden Key Bank. This key can provide the owner with unlimited funds, even if the bank has to go into debt to do so. She realized the value of it. Ashalot, standing behind Elizabeth, informed her that she could use this key without restriction. The girl was stunned by this news and, despite the possibilities offered, was determined not to use it. Vassal, apparently an alchemist, seemed concerned when he learned that he was being asked to produce everything needed in a week. He expressed his doubts, but Elizabeth and Ashalot offered to quadruple the fee to speed up the process. This convinced Vassal. Vassal assured that everything would be ready in no time because money can speed up any job. Elizabeth and Ashalot were satisfied with his answer, and Vassal began working with double the energy to complete the order. Elizabeth then asked Ashalot where he was going to spend the night. He replied that he was going to stay in his dimensional workshop. She was surprised, but he explained that it was the safest place for a wizard. Ashalot shared with Elizabeth that he would take her with him if he could. However, being in an enclosed space was bad for a human, so he left her on the surface despite his desire to protect her. Vasil was surprised to learn that Ashalot was serious about giving Elizabeth the key to his workshop. It was unexpected and touching to him, as a wizard's workshop is usually heavily guarded. Ashalot explained to Elizabeth that the key to his workshop would be her protection in case of danger. She would be able to get in there at any time by simply using the key. This was unprecedented trust on the part of a wizard. Elizabeth was shocked to realize the importance of the workshop to the wizard. She couldn't believe that Ashalot would just give her his key for nothing, for the workshop was more important than her own life. She remembered the story in the book where another wizard, Elizabeth, would not give her key to even the closest person. This act by Ashalot showed her how much he trusts her and is willing to protect her at all costs. Elizabeth asks Ashalot if she can use a certain item for fear that someone might forcibly take it from her. Ashalot explains that she can't have that object get inside while he sleeps. Ashalot assures Elizabeth that it cannot be used against her will. Even if someone tries to do so, they won't succeed. Elizabeth is clearly concerned and surprised by this. Ashalot states that there are about 1,000 battle golems guarding the inside of it, which should increase its security. This should reassure Elizabeth, knowing this protection. Ashalot reminds Elizabeth that she should only worry about herself. His gaze expresses concern and seriousness, showing that he wants her to be safe. Ashalot asks Elizabeth to try to stay out of trouble. He stands in front of her, surrounded by a magical glow, which gives the scene an air of importance and magic. Elizabeth experiences a strange sense of déjà vu. She feels as if she will never see Ashalot again if he disappears in this way, which causes her inner turmoil. Elizabeth ponders that a month is not that long. She realizes this, but still feels sadness. She recalls that she decided long ago not to rely on Ashalot completely. Elizabeth smiles and says that she will wait for Ashalot. Her bright smile conveys hope and faith that they will meet again, despite all the hardships. Ethan announces that Miss Elizabeth Lilly is henceforth under the care of the association. He offers to pretend as if the negotiations never happened, which shows their secret agreement. Jade asks about the terms, to which Elizabeth replies that they will give a long-term license to use some of Vane's spells of spatial magic. The picture ends with a scene with a magical effect that emphasizes the importance of what has been said. Ethan and Jade sat around a table discussing the terms of the agreement. Ethan offered to provide financial compensation and a unilateral non-aggression pact for the next 3 years, thinking that should interest them. Jade thought about the offer, finding it attractive. He noted that non-aggression for 3 years sounded good, but it would be extremely difficult to convince his superiors, even with those terms. Ethan added that if they included the inviolability clause of the Wise Serpent Medical Association, the agreement would remain in effect even in the event of war. This caused Jade some curiosity and surprise. As Jade sipped his tea, he noted that the negotiations were becoming more and more entertaining. He was sure that in the first negotiation, they had not even considered that this could be the cause of a war. Ethan asked how Jade knew about the important details. Jade replied that the new information had come to light during the investigation of the attack on the Imperial ship, which had added intrigue to their negotiations. Jade recalled that at the beginning of the negotiations, they'd tried to figure out how far Ashaloth was willing to go for a mage with the Eye of Truth. Jade recognized that he'd been cleverly used, and at first he hadn't even realized it. Ethan warned Jade not to impose absurd assumptions on him. Ethan stressed that he wasn't to blame for what had happened and expressed his sincere condolences for the death of the head of their organization. Jade thought that the wizards at the Axiom School were really complicated people. He sadly noted that his patience for their shamelessness had worn thin, and he thought that his vitality had completely worn out. Ethan said that Jade should thank him for taking his request seriously. Ethan held up his cup as if to emphasize the importance of his words. Jade admitted that every mage with the Eye of Truth was doomed to collapse. He emphasized that the association would not take the risk of falling victim to such an outcome as long as he was in charge. Therefore, if Elbana really wants to take one of the next generation leaders under his wing, he will gladly hand over the child as long as there is no conspiracy behind it. Jade explains that while he gets orders from above, he doesn't always follow them. He didn't want to send the child to Holland, but would rather take custody of the child. This shows that Jade, despite her position, is acting on her own accord. Ethan continues by pointing out that Jade's union is not safe for the child, citing Vasilios as an example. He believes his own candidacy is a better fit than a mentor who likes to remake the bodies of his students. This hints at the dangers of Jade's union. Jade mockingly asks when Ethan got so deep into the subject of mages with the Eye of Truth, emphasizing his awareness. Ethan, in turn, points out that the Axiom mages cannot be underestimated, which shows their cunning and power. Jade recognizes that the Axiom School would have known the full details of what happened if action hadn't been taken. He agrees to Ethan's terms, realizing that this is the best option. This shows that Jade is capable of compromising for safety. Ethan sarcastically remarks that Jade probably meant submission rather than understanding. This emphasizes the tension between them and their different perceptions of power and control in the magical world. Ethan reminds them that it's not just about who is stronger, but that Jade has no excuses for his atrocities. He rebukes him for his experiments in resurrecting people, which brings shame to Jade. A certain woman reminds him that loud words are for those who hide behind the backs of Axiom mages, but it should not be forgotten that she too is a mage with the Eye of Truth. This shows her strength and willingness to protect her interests. Ethan assures her that they will deal with problems as they come. He knows it will be later than Jade's vessel of life is completely depleted, hinting at the temporary benefits and long-term risks. Ethan thanks for agreeing to negotiate and wishes Jade to take care of himself on the way back. This shows formality and politeness in their interaction, despite the underlying hostility. Jade, with a smirk, inquires about the state of Ethan's body. This question emphasizes their mutual suspicions and hidden threats, creating an atmosphere of tension and anticipation of future conflicts. Elizabeth experienced a sharp pain and felt something terrible approaching. Her thoughts were confused. She tried to understand what was happening, but the pain kept her from concentrating, and fear was taking over her mind. All she could do was try to calm herself down, lying on the bed. She felt like she had just fallen asleep in anticipation of tomorrow, but instead she woke up in a nightmare she couldn't get out of. Elizabeth began to question her own thoughts. She wondered if this was a delusion brought on by her wounds. Her mind was filled with strange, incomprehensible images, and she couldn't tell where was reality and where was illusion. She remembered her family who had taken her in, the only adopted child of the Basta family of Alpeni. These memories seemed so distant and almost unreal, as if they were happening in another life. But immediately a picture of her life of slavery came before her eyes. Her foster parents turned out to be a couple of sectarians using children for their own sinister purposes. Elizabeth felt trapped and unable to escape. She began to wonder if her name was really Elizabeth Basta. She doubted her own name and her past, trying to make sense of the chaos of her memories. She tried to pull herself together, realizing that if she didn't, she would die before she could do anything. Her mind was on edge, but she tried to find the strength to keep fighting. Elizabeth realized that if she died here and now, her foster parents would continue to torture the other test subjects. She wouldn't get a second chance to save them, and that realization gave her determination. Ashloth, a man with black hair, watched her. He was the one who was supposed to be following her, and that added to her fear and despair. His presence was like a shadow hanging over her head. But suddenly Elizabeth felt a magical power within her. Healing magic began to envelope her, giving her hope and strength to keep fighting. She felt she could now stand up to any threat and was ready to fight to the end. Ashloth came for Elizabeth, determined to free her. Elizabeth is perplexed as to why he is here and why he would do this. Ashloth declares that a sorceress with the eye of truth should not be a slave to sectarians, a decision made by the Mage Association and the Axum School. Elizabeth doesn't believe his intentions and suspects that he just wants to take her for his own purposes. She feels resentful that her work with the sect did not please the mages. Elizabeth accuses Ashloth of planning to take her away by force. Elizabeth accuses Ashloth of hypocrisy and of doing it all for himself. Ashloth says that they are doing it for her good, though she doesn't understand everything yet. He assures her of his good intentions despite her disbelief and resentment. Ashloth warns that she will have to accept the deserved punishment specified in the Great Treaty. Elizabeth angrily refuses his orders, calling them delusional, and accuses him of doing nothing good for her. Elizabeth recalls the day Ashloth saved her and says that he would have been better off leaving her to die then. She accuses him of insolence and lying, claiming that all his actions are motivated by personal gain rather than concern for her. Ashloth threatens to use force if she doesn't go easy on him. Elizabeth, feeling hopeless, agrees, realizing it is futile to confront him. She decides to follow him despite her resistance. Elizabeth's memories come alive as she sees herself as a little girl, excited to travel to Erigel. She asks Ashloth if she will become a sorceress when they get there. Ashloth reluctantly agrees, allowing her to dream. Elizabeth can't believe her eyes as she sees her past. She realizes that her memories have been altered and begins to question her reality. These moments cause her to experience a storm of emotions and mixed feelings. Elizabeth realizes that her memories are connected to Ashloth, but she cannot remember him as a protector. She realizes that her life and her past are not as she remembered them. This realization makes her question her feelings and her future. Elizabeth decides to trust Ashloth despite her doubts and anger. She realizes that her fate is now tied to him and hopes that he truly cares for her well-being despite all the events that have happened. The enemies had surrounded the ship, and Michael asked Ashloth for help, to which he responded, ready to come to the rescue. The situation was becoming critical, and immediate intervention was required. Elizabeth was surprised to realize that she was on a ship. She thought back to whether she had ever flown one before, and anxiety gripped her heart. Seeing the tension, she tried to make sense of what was happening. The girl with golden hair was determined and didn't want Ashloth to leave them. She begged him to stay, seeing in him the last hope of escape from the imminent threat. Michael realized his audacity in asking Ashloth for help and apologized for his insistence. However, he had no other choice and realized that their lives depended on it. Ashloth thought about the girl's condition and realized that she had very little magical energy left. Despite this, there was no other way out, and he had to act. Elizabeth penetrated Ashloth's essence to restore order. Her determination and willpower instilled hope in the hearts of everyone around her, for she was willing to sacrifice herself to save the day. Ashloth felt a restlessness in his soul, not understanding the cause of the anxiety. He knew that a decision had to be made quickly, but something prevented him from acting decisively. The girl had fallen unconscious, and Ashloth made the decision to use resurrection magic despite the dangerous side effects. He knew it was their only chance to save her. Ashloth felt that if the girl didn't open her eyes and breathe now, they would lose her. His anxiety was growing, and he was doing everything he could to help her. Resurrection magic carried strong side effects, and the most dangerous aspect was the loss of memories. Elizabeth tried to realize who was in front of her, and Ashloth held the girl in his arms, hoping for the best. Elizabeth thinks about how sometimes a day or even two is erased from a memory. She is certain that the memories she sees through the eye of truth cannot be false, and it confirms her speculation about the events that took place. Ashloth appears to have frightened Elizabeth sitting on the ground. In that moment, she remembers how she can forget several months of her life at once, and it leaves her confused. Elizabeth trembles with fear, thinking that now Ashalot will deal with her in the same way he did with the head of the cult. She stands in a daze, awaiting her fate, afraid to even move. Elizabeth recalls how she called upon evil spirits for protection, but ended up fleeing to save herself. She acted as fast as she could, hoping her plan would work. Elizabeth, standing surrounded by a strange light, begs for someone to save her. She fears that evil spirits may harm her and waits for help from the unknown. Ashalot looks at Elizabeth, pondering how her body, which he had barely saved, was once again in a terrible state. He realizes that at this rate it will be difficult for her to survive. Ashalot agrees to grant Elizabeth's wish, even though she is in trouble again. He promises to help her, looking at her with his penetrating gaze. The red-haired sorceress admires Elizabeth, calling her a sorceress with the eye of truth. Her words emphasize Elizabeth's unique abilities and her importance. Ashalot holds Elizabeth in his arms, demanding that the enchantress fix her and revive her. He shows his determination and concern for the girl, unwilling to give up. The enchantress notices signs of using resurrection magic and asks Ashalot if he has revived her before. Ashalot remains silent, showing that he is willing to do whatever it takes to save Elizabeth. Elizabeth was surprised to see such an unfamiliar expression on Ashalot's face. This moment stirred up many feelings and doubts in her. She never expected to see him so vulnerable and human, which made her heart beat faster. Ashalot finished his preparations, waiting for Elizabeth to awaken. He hoped that all his efforts had not been in vain and that she would soon open her eyes. This moment was filled with tension and anticipation, and a vague anxiety hung in the air. Elizabeth woke up in a panic, screaming that she was scared and not to be touched. Her eyes expressed terror and despair. She felt lost and unprotected in this world full of uncertainty and danger. Vassal hugged Elizabeth anxiously, trying to understand why Ashalot had killed her immediately after resurrecting her. He sensed that she had serious memory problems, and it could have been a threat to them all. But despite everything, here she was in his arms. Elizabeth was frightened and begged to banish Ashalot. Her fear was so great that she could not look at him calmly. Ashalot, sensing her fear, decided to leave so as not to cause her any more pain. His retreat was filled with bitterness and regret. Ashalot drifted into sleep when it was time for him to recover. He remembered waking up at the moment Moira's magical volcano erupted. That moment had been pivotal in his life of magic and the dangers that always followed. By the time Ashalot awoke, there was utter chaos all around. The city was engulfed in destruction, and he had to deal with what had happened during his sleep. He felt responsible for everything that had happened and was ready to fight for peace. In less than a month, the city was filled with artificially created monsters, demons, and evil spirits. This influx of evil led to the deaths of many people, leaving a trail of destruction and sorrow. Ashalot and his friends realized that the fight was just beginning. Vasilios was overwhelmed by the casualties among the unificationists. He had no free time. He was trying to find out where Ellie had gone and what had happened to her. Everyone was on edge, and he had to make quick decisions amidst the chaos. Ellie succumbed to the sweet speeches of the nobles and decided to leave with them. Her decision shocked everyone, especially Ashalot and Vasilios. They had to literally beg her to stay, but she left anyway. This betrayal left a deep mark on their hearts. Ethan thinks back to Elizabeth and asks Ashalot if he remembers her. There is anxiety in his eyes, and he begins to suspect that something has gone wrong. Ashalot, disturbed by the sudden mention of Elizabeth, asks what is wrong. His face expresses determination and seriousness. Ethan confirms that something probably happened to Elizabeth, but he's not sure if it was voluntary. Ashalot demands to know the details, expressing impatience and a willingness to take action. Ethan hands Ashalot a sealed black envelope, explaining that it is a list of the mages responsible for the disaster 6 years ago and the subsequent demon release. Ashalot scrutinizes the envelope, his face becoming even more determined. Ashalot says he will get rid of the guilty parties today. He informs Ethan of the rumors among the continent's inhabitants, adding to the air of mystery and tension. Ashalot tells of an amber-eyed demon that preys on mages and suggests that the demon came from Alpania. He is not sure if the events are connected, but his suspicions grow. Ashalot confirms that the people who adopted Elizabeth are nobles from Alpania. It can't be a mere coincidence, he thinks, and his face becomes even more focused. Ethan doubts it's just a rumor, since people who talk about such things aren't prone to idle chatter. He believes the mage hunt is no ordinary ramblings, and the culprit is already known but not publicly announced. Ashalot, turning to Ethan, says he decided to bring it up for a reason. He is certain that mage hunting is serious business and that the culprit behind the disaster is already known. Ashalot is determined to make sure Elizabeth is safe. He remembers her smiling face surrounded by light and color, and his determination to protect her intensifies. Elizabeth desperately tries to understand what lurks inside Ashalot, but her strength is running out. She feels defenseless and exhausted. Ashalot holds out a bag of mysterious lilac candies to Elizabeth, telling her that she needs to eat them. These candies shimmer with magical sparks, sparking interest and disbelief. Elizabeth wonders if Ashalot is always carrying lilac candies that replenish magical powers. She decides not to give them up despite her doubts. As she tastes the candy, Elizabeth feels a strange sense of nostalgia, as if she has missed the flavor for a long time. This triggers mixed feelings and memories in her. Ashalot, concerned about Elizabeth's condition, asks if she is all right. His concern causes her to be even more surprised and perplexed. Elizabeth reproaches Ashalot for not telling her anything. She wants to know how he was able to give up on her so easily while feeling the pain of his indifference. Elizabeth admits that she always knew the answer to her question, but hoped Ashalot would tell her something different. Her disappointment and pain are evident. Ashalot assures Elizabeth that he will make sure she is judged fairly. He promises that she will not face execution or slavery, trying to reassure her. Elizabeth, not believing his sympathy and pity, asks Ashalot why he wants to save her. She feels vulnerable and does not understand his motives. Elizabeth cries out, asking if Ashalot really wants to help her. Her voice is filled with desperation and hope for a sincere answer. Elizabeth and Ashalot are standing on a desolate plain when Elizabeth declares that she does not want to accept his help. Ashalot insists that she has no right to refuse and offers her his help. Elizabeth threatens to blow her head off if she is forced to stand trial. She assures her that she will carry out her threat if Ashalot tries to take her hostage. Elizabeth, looking directly into Ashalot's eyes, declares that she will kill herself. She is clearly prepared for any consequences and is not afraid to threaten her own life to preserve her freedom. Elizabeth stands in a futuristic capsule surrounded by water and asks Ashalot to help her first. She must save someone, and to do so, she must act immediately. Elizabeth urges Ashalot to help free the children that the sectarians are holding captive. She desperately needs his help to rescue the subject children and end their suffering. Ashalot expresses doubts, suspecting that Elizabeth herself has chosen to remain among the sectarians. He is unsure of her sincerity and suspects that she may have been brainwashed. Ashalot warns that even if they save the test subjects, the children are unlikely to thank them. He says that destroying the sect won't absolve them of all their sins or bring oblivion. Elizabeth admits that she understands. Ashalot offers his help in revenge, even offering to get rid of her adoptive parents if she wants. He is willing to do anything to help her. Elizabeth, looking to the sky, replies that she does not seek revenge. She does what she wants and acts on her convictions. It's the only thing she can do, and she doesn't want revenge on anyone. Elizabeth, with golden hair and a determined look, ponders whether Ashalot thinks she is a pathetic slave girl babbling nonsense. She is eager to prove her worth and strength, rejecting any humiliation. Ashalot, with black hair and a serious expression, replies that her desire is genuine. He sees potential and confidence in her that deserves respect. Elizabeth admits that she no longer fears or hates Ashalot. She feels that her feelings for him have changed, and now she sees him as an ally rather than an enemy. Her heart is filled with love for Ashalot. She no longer hides her feelings and realizes that she is truly and hopelessly in love with him, which gives her strength and confidence. Upon awakening, Elizabeth feels that she dreamt something important, but cannot remember the details. She feels a vague sense of unease, but cannot grasp its essence. A servant asks Elizabeth if she is awake, noticing her crying eyes. Elizabeth admits that she had another nightmare that left her distraught. A smile appears on her face when she hears that Hestia is already here. Hestia's presence brings her comfort and a sense of security despite the recent nightmare. It has been 2 weeks since Ashaloth fell asleep. The house that recently belonged to the supreme demon is now full of life and expectation. though the demon's presence is still felt. Elizabeth habitually greets the guests that keep coming. She has learned to appreciate these moments of companionship and support that help her cope with her anxieties and fears. Hestia, with white short hair, greets Elizabeth with a smile and a good morning wish. Her cheerfulness and strength give Elizabeth confidence and inspiration for the new day.